Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if son of three virgin goddesses Artemis, Athena, and Hestia. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. The three goddesses Artemis, Athena, and Hestia had decided to spend the day together with each other in the mortal world. On Hestia's suggestion they decided to spend the day walking around NYC to see the sights. I'm so glad you suggested this, Hestia. It's been a while since we have been able to just walk around relaxed like this. A woman with long black hair and piercing gray eyes named Athena said happily. Yes, I agree with Athena on this, Hestia. Though I think it would be better if there were more wooded areas around. A woman with curly auburn hair and silver eyes named Artemis said, causing the other two to groan good-naturedly at her. Yes, this was one of my better ideas, wasn't it? You would say that, Artemis, you love the wilderness. A woman with brown hair and flames for eyes named Hestia asked then stated amusedly. All three then broke out laughing as they continued on their way around the city, with Athena pointing out important buildings or other creations as they went. Later on that day, as they were turning a corner down a less busy street, they came upon the sight of a tall blonde man battling a hellhound with a sword. They were surprised to see him and figured he was a demigod. As the man finished slaying the hellhound, he turned around to see the three women walking towards him. Hello young man, I am the goddess Hestia and these two are Artemis and Athena. We were wondering who you were and who your godly parent is. Hestia asked as they reached him. The man immediately dropped to one knee in front of them. My name is Manado Namikaze, my ladies. I am sorry to say that I am not a demigod. I'm just a clear-sighted mortal who teaches kenjutsu in the local area. The man now known as Manado stated as he stood up. Then how did you get a hold of the weapons you used? Athena asked inquisitively while still shocked that he was a clear-sighted mortal. My lady, I gained these blades from a centaur near the edge of town and used them to protect the people around here from the monsters, as they cannot see them as I can. Manado stated respectfully. You must think you're a great man for doing this and can do whatever you want, right? Artemis asked disdainfully, getting a sigh from the other two goddesses at her tone. No, my lady, I consider it an honor to protect these people and believe that them being safe is all the reward I need for what I do. That is why I train so much and teach others my art. Manado stated respectfully to her, receiving a shocked look from her as she could tell he wasn't lying to her. Well young man, I believe it is time for us to go now. We must get back to our work as goddesses. Hestia said in a kind voice while smiling. Yes, my lady, I hope to meet you three again in my lifetime. Goodbye. Manado said while bowing to each of them in turn. He then closed his eyes as they flashed away. Back on Olympus, the three goddesses had reappeared in Hestia's temple. Well, today was fun and meeting that mortal was very insightful. I really liked him. Hestia said happily. Yes, it was rather refreshing to finally meet a humble and kind man for once. Artemis said thoughtfully. Yes, I agree with you both on the man. He seemed like he would be good to engage in conversation with. Athena said wistfully. They parted ways a few minutes later after saying their goodbyes and headed back to their duties. Several years later, the three goddesses had decided to go walking around NYC again and hoped to come upon the mortal Manado again to talk with him. I wonder if we will run into him today like we did then? Athena asked thoughtfully. We might, you never know. Hestia said while smiling. Yes, it would be good to talk with him about the monster population here. Artemis said while looking around the area. The three continued on their way happily. They noticed they were coming upon the area they met the man at before and started looking around for him. Suddenly they heard a pained groan and noticed a trail of blood leading to a side street and followed it cautiously. They gasped when they found Manado sitting against a wall with a hole through his stomach. Manado, what happened to you? Hestia asked with a pained look on her face. My lady, IW was injured by the Minotaur. Manado said through gasps. The three goddesses gasped at that. I'm afraid your wound is fatal, Manado, and we have no way to heal you. I am sorry. Athena said sadly after inspecting his wound. It is all right, my lady, I knew I wasn't going to make it when I was injured. Manado gasped out. Conserve your strength, Manado, and don't talk too much. I will try to ease the pain for you. Artemis said sadly as she used a rare power she had to dull the pain for him. Thank you, my lady, for that. Manado said as he smiled at them. They sat with him for a while before they noticed he was starting to fade. It is almost time, I can feel it. My only regret is that I never had a family of my own because I dedicated myself to protecting the innocents around me. Manado said sadly before his life left him. Three goddesses looked at him sadly for a moment before looking at each other and nodding. Let's grant his last regret for him. Hestia said sadly as she bent down and collated some of his blood. Yes, I believe he is the one man worthy of this. Artemis said as she cut her arm and let her ichor pool into Hestia's hand along with Manado's. Yes, I agree, he is more deserving than most people of this honor. Athena said as she mimicked Artemis with her own ichor. With my ichor as the final component, I create I-child for Manado Namikaze to have a family. Hestia said as she added her own ichor and mixed it all together. A flash happened and then died down, and there in Hestia's arms was a child that was the spitting image of his father, except he had two different colored eyes, one silver and one gray. He also had whisker marks on his cheeks. He is so cute, isn't he, Artemis? Hestia asked while looking at him. Yes, he is very cute. I wonder why he has whisker marks on his cheeks though? Artemis asked with a smile on her face. That is probably something he got from you, Artemis, after all you are the goddess of the hunt and wilderness. Athena stated while tickling the little baby. The other two agreed with Athena's thoughts, and then Artemis did something and Manado's body disappeared. What should we name him? Artemis asked thoughtfully. How about Naruto Namikaze in honor of his father? Hestia said happily. I agree, that is a splendid name, Hestia. Athena said happily. The three began to walk around happily while talking and cooing at Naruto. As it got later, they began to discuss on what to do with him since they couldn't raise him themselves as it was against the gods' laws. Where will we take him, Hestia? Manado had no family to take him in. Artemis asked her. We will have to take him to an orphanage and leave him there. Hestia said sadly. I know just the place, it's ran by a daughter of Demeter. So we can show ourselves to her and make sure he is well taken care of. Athena said happily. The others smiled at this news and nodded as they flashed to the place. They reappeared on a long dirt road surrounded by woods on the outskirts of Long Island. I already like this place, it's secluded and surrounded by woods. Artemis said happily as they began walking down the road. Yes, I knew you would, Artemis. It's an orphanage specifically made for demigod children, it even has a shield around it to keep out monsters. Athena explained to them. So who is this daughter of Demeter that runs this place, Athena? Hestia asked expectantly. Oh, her name is Stephanie Ramirez. She wanted to give demigod children who hadn't come of age yet and had no family left a place to live till she could take them to camp. Athena explained happily as they turned a corner in the road and saw the orphanage in the distance. Well, there it is, let's hurry so we can talk to her before it gets too late. Hestia said as they sped up to get there quickly. As they arrived at the door, a tall woman with long brown hair and kind green eyes walked out to meet them. When she realized who they were, she bowed her head to them in respect. How may I help you, my ladies? She asked in a soft voice. Stephanie, we would like you to take in our child here till he is of age to go to Camp Half-Blood. Athena answered in an equally soft voice. I would be honored to, my ladies. Stephanie said as she looked towards Naruto, who was asleep in Hestia's arms. Thank you, Stephanie, for doing this for us. Hestia said in a kind voice. Stephanie bowed her head to her with a smile on her face. May we come in for a moment? We wish to leave a few things with you for him? Artemis asked her nicely. Yes, please come on in, my ladies. Stephanie said as she held the door open for them. She then led them up a set of stairs and to her office on the second floor. Now may I see what you have left for him? Stephanie asked softly. Artemis nodded her head and pulled out a necklace with a pendant of a moon surrounded by a bow on it and handed it to her. This is a special necklace that will turn into a bow for him when he pulls on the bow pendant. Artemis explained as Stephanie nodded and placed it in a drawer on her desk. Artemis then snapped her hand and a fox appeared and looked at her. I would also like to leave Kurama here with Naruto as protection for him. He is an enchanted fox, she said as Stephanie nodded as the fox moved to her side. Athena then stepped forward and snapped her fingers. When the flash died down, a red Sox hat and a thick book on mythology with a note appeared on Stephanie's desk. I am leaving Naruto one of my invisibility caps that will work by a mental command, and one of my personal books on mythology with a note for him. Athena said as Stephanie placed them in her desk with a nod. Hestia then handed Naruto over to Artemis and pulled out a Zippo and handed it to Stephanie. That is a 2-in-1 gift. It will work like a regular lighter to always give him a flame to use his powers with. Also, when he pushes in on the engraving of a sword while thinking about a sword, it will turn into a katana for him. Hestia said as she watched Stephanie call out the katana form of the sword. The katana had a celestial bronze blade with a plain silver rectangular guard and black wrappings on the handle. Stephanie nodded as the katana turned back into the zippo and she placed it back into her desk. "I will make sure he receives them when he is old enough, my ladies," Stephanie said as she bowed her head to them. "Thank you, Stephanie," Hestia said happily. "We must go now before the other gods start wondering where we are." Athena said unhappily as she kissed Naruto on the head. "Please take good care of him for us, Stephanie," Artemis said as she handed him to Stephanie after she and Hestia had kissed him on the head as well. "I will, my ladies, to the best of my abilities," Stephanie said. "Thank you. We also leave $10,000 to help take care of him," they said together as they flashed away back to Olympus. After they were gone, Stephanie looked down at Naruto and smiled. "He is going to be a strong demigod," she thought as she left her office and headed to the nursery just down the hall. When she arrived, she placed Naruto into one of the cribs and placed Kurama into the crib beside him. 6 years later, a spiky blonde-haired boy could be seen out in the woods around the orphanage leaning against a tree reading a thick book on mythology which he loved to learn about. He was a special boy with heterochromatic eyes, one was silver and the other was gray. He had whisker marks on his cheeks. He was wearing a necklace around his neck with a pendant of a moon surrounded by bow. He had on an orange shirt and green camouflage pants and combat boots on his feet. He also had a red Sox hat on his head and he was flicking a Zippo open and closed absent-mindedly in his left hand. Suddenly he looked up and to his left as he heard a voice calling out his name. He closed his book with a groan and got up and headed in the direction of the voice to see Stephanie waiting for him at the edge of the woods. "Naruto, where have you been? You were supposed to be back 30 minutes ago?" Stephanie asked in a sharp tone as she saw him walking towards her. Sorry, I lost track of time while reading my book you gave me from my mom," Naruto said sheepishly while rubbing the back of his head. Stephanie's look softened at that as she shook her head exasperatedly. "Naruto, you need to start being more aware when you're doing things," she said as she grabbed his hand and led him back towards the orphanage. "I know and I'm sorry, I'll try to fix that," Naruto said as he looked ahead towards the entrance of the orphanage. "Well, come on Naruto, we need to get you sorted for a new school since you got kicked out of the last one," Stephanie said in a soft tone as she knew Naruto hated not being able to stay in one school for longer than a year. "Yeah, I know, I hate that I got kicked out of my last one," Naruto said sadly as he looked down. Till he was tackled by an orange blur causing him to cry out in shock and Stephanie to laugh out loud. When Naruto got over his shock and had pushed what had tackled him off of him, he had looked to see it was Kurama and smiled. "Thanks buddy, I needed that," Naruto said as he scratched Kurama behind his ear. Kurama yipped at Naruto and snuggled into his hand more. Slowly Naruto got up while holding Kurama and he and Stephanie made their way inside and up to her office. They spent a few hours there finding a school that would take Naruto as a student. Finally they found one called Yansy Academy that had agreed to take Naruto as a student. They agreed it would be best for him as it was a boarding school and Naruto could stay there during the school year and come back during the summer. "Well, now that we have found a school for you Naruto, we can take it easy for now," Stephanie said as she smiled at him. "Do you think they will let me continue my kenjutsu training there as my school for it is close by?" Naruto asked hopefully. "I don't see why not Naruto, but you will have to talk to them about it and set something up," Stephanie said while smiling at him. Naruto had nodded at that, then asked if he could go back outside for a while. Stephanie had sighed then and allowed him to go back outside and play. Naruto had hopped up at that and grabbed Kurama and made a beeline for the front door. Once he was outside, he let Kurama jump to the ground and they took off towards the woods again. "So what do you think of my new school, Kurama?" Naruto asked the fox once they were a good ways in. "As long as they don't mind me being there, I think it will be a good place for you," Kurama said back in a series of yips. "Yeah, I guess you're right, I just hope nothing too bad happens while we're there," Naruto said, receiving a nod of agreement from the fox. After that they spent a good portion of the day just hanging out in the woods with Naruto practicing his kenjutsu and archery skills. That night Naruto stayed up to stare at the full moon, which always had the effect of calming him down and helping him clear his thoughts so he could think more clearly. During these times Naruto would usually spend it thinking about his parents, his mom or moms, if he could believe some of the stuff Stephanie would tell him in particular, and wonder who they were and where they were. He would also think about his many talents and gifts he had during this time as well. Like his abilities in archery and kenjutsu, and whether his parents had these abilities as well. A gift he had that he always wondered about was his photographic memory and how it helped him in his schooling even though he had ADHD and dyslexia. After a few hours of these thoughts, Naruto finally let himself drift off to sleep while still watching the full moon. 6 years later. Naruto had changed a lot during this time. He had garnered a reputation at Yansy as one of the silent bad boys who was also the smartest in his grade. He had also made 2 friends in Percy Jackson and Grover Underwood. Many people were skeptical about their friendship as they were very different in a lot of ways, but just shrugged it off. Currently Naruto was in his room preparing for the day as they had a field trip for their Latin class that day. Naruto had decided to dress in his black shirt that had a design of an owl with a moon in the background flying over a sea of flames on the front. He also wore his customary camouflage pants and black combat boots. Around his neck he wore his moon and bow pendant, and on his head his red socks hat. As he was leaving his room to head to his Latin classroom, he grabbed his Zippo off his dresser and placed it in his pocket. As he was walking, he thought back to the summer before where Stephanie had finally revealed the truth to him about his mothers being Olympian goddesses. He had been skeptical at first until Stephanie showed him irrefutable proof of the gods being real by using her powers and explaining that she was a daughter of Demeter. After he had learned that he had doubled his studies into Greek mythology and his weapons practices. He had also learned of the abilities of his hat, pendant, and Zippo at that time then too. He had also spent most of that summer trying to figure out who his mothers were among the goddesses, but when he couldn't, Stephanie had just told him to wait and he would find out when he arrived at Camp Half-Blood and they claimed him. Naruto came out of his thoughts as he came to his Latin classroom's door. He took a deep breath to calm himself and entered the room. When he looked around, he saw most of his classmates already there, including Percy and Grover. He could also see Mr. Brunner at the front of the class in his wheelchair and nodded to him as he walked past him to where Percy and Grover were at. A few minutes later and the door opened to allow Mrs. Dods into the room. Naruto scowled at her as she was one of his most hated teachers and he knew that she was actually a fury. He just didn't know why she was here. He saw Mr. Brunner stiffen a little in his chair at her entrance but then relax. As she nodded to him, signaling that the bus was ready for them. "Well class, it's time for us to head out. Please form a line and follow Mrs. Dods to where the bus is," Mr. Brunner said in his usual kind voice. A few minutes later, Naruto was on the bus in a seat across from Grover and Percy, watching as Percy got mad at Nancy Bobofit, who was throwing pieces of her sandwich at Grover and laughing as it got stuck in his hair. He finally got tired of it when he saw Percy about to get himself in trouble while Grover was trying to stop him. "Nancy, if you don't stop you'll be next on my list," Naruto said in an innocent tone, causing Nancy to freeze and start sweating. She could remember the last person who had been on his list and didn't want to be added to it. "Okay, I'll stop, but why do you keep hanging around them? They're losers," Nancy asked hesitantly. "Because they're better company than you are, Nancy," Naruto answered as he turned away from her. They had been at the museum for a while now, and Naruto and his 2 friends were at the back of the group while commenting on how some of the things would be fun to do, like ridding the chariots. When Mr. Brunner had led the group up to a tall stone column that he called a stele, a grave marker for a girl about their age. They had suddenly found themselves at the front of the group and had been trying to pay close attention to Mr. Brunner, but a group of people behind them were talking too loud for them to hear him properly. "Can you guys shut up?" Percy finally said angrily. "Mr. Jackson, do you have something you would like to say?" Mr. Brunner asked, clapping his hand together. "No sir," Percy mumbled out while the others snickered at him until they saw Naruto giving them the evil eye. "Well then perhaps you could tell me what is happening in the picture," Mr. Brunner said, motioning to a picture on the stele that showed a man with a child in his hand and his mouth wide open. "Well, that's Kronos eating his kids," Percy said as he gained some confidence after recognizing the pictures. "Yes, and he did this because?" Mr. Brunner asked, obviously not satisfied. "Well," Percy began, not sure of the reason. "He was the king of the Titans and he didn't trust his kids, the gods. So he ate them, but his wife Rhea hid baby Zeus, and gave him a rock to eat instead. Then when Zeus was older he tricked his father into barfing up his brothers and sisters. Then there was a war and the gods won." Naruto supplied for Percy, who smiled, thanking Naruto. Some of the girls in the class went ew when the comment about barfing was mentioned. That is correct, Mr. Brunner said. Then the world became ruled by the 12 Olympian gods, with the strongest being Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. He added as he pointed out 3 small figures on the stele. Ever since they overthrew their father they have been rivals ever since. Mr. Brunner added after a few minutes of silence. On many occasions the gods came down to earth, and how should I put this? Mr. Brunner said in thought before Naruto spoke up. They hooked up because they couldn't keep it in their pants. He said, causing everyone to laugh, including Mrs. Dods and Mr. Brunner. That is correct, Mr. Namikaze. Can you tell me the correct terms for these children? Mr. Brunner asked him. They were called demigods, I believe, part mortal, part god. Naruto said, receiving a nod from Mr. Brunner. Could you name me some of these demigods? Mr. Brunner asked, directing the question towards Naruto. Let's see, there was Hercules and Perseus, they were sons of Zeus. Then there was Theseus, and he was a son of Poseidon. Naruto said in answer, receiving a nod from Mr. Brunner. That is correct, very good, Mr. Namikaze. It's good to see that you pay attention in class. Mr. Brunner said with a small smile on his face. However, they heard snickers coming from the group behind them and Nancy Bobafit saying, like we're going to use this in real life. Like it's going to say on our job applications. Please explain why Kronos ate his kids or name a demigod. She continued to snicker for a few minutes longer after saying that. And why Mr. Jackson, Mr. Brunner asked, to paraphrase Mrs. Bobafit's excellent question, does this matter in real life? Percy thought about the question for a moment. I'm sorry sir, but I really don't know. Percy finally said. And how about you, Mr. Namikaze? He asked Naruto. Well sir, there are many ways this could matter in real life. You could get a job like an architect or mythologist where this pertains to your field of study. Or there are some other ways, but most of them would cause people here to call me crazy. Naruto answered, causing Mr. Brunner and Mrs. Dods to narrow their eyes at him for a moment. I see, Mr. Brunner said after a moment. Well, half credit to you both. On that note, it's time for lunch. Mrs. Dods, would you lead us back outside? Mr. Brunner said, then asked. She nodded, then led the students back down the hallway. It wasn't till a few minutes later that Naruto realized that Percy wasn't with him and looked around, seeing him having a conversation with Mr. Brunner. He shrugged, realizing it was none of his business, and started to look around to see if there was anything he hadn't seen yet. When they were near the end of the hallway, Naruto saw an area off to the side that had statues of the goddesses with the 3 virgin goddesses in the center. He approached their statues, feeling drawn to them. Interesting, aren't they? He heard a voice say, and turned around to see Mr. Brunner at the entrance to the area. Yes, there, I don't know why, but I feel drawn to them. Naruto said as he turned back around to look at the statues again. Naruto, I was wondering if you could tell me what the rest of your answer to my question would have been. Mr. Brunner asked while staring at the statues as well. I guess I could, sir. You see, this would also matter in real life if you were like me, and I'm starting to believe Percy is as well, and have gods or goddesses as parents. Naruto answered, causing Mr. Brunner's eyes to widen. How do you know? Mr. Brunner asked. Do you know that orphanage that is run by Stephanie Ramirez? Naruto asked, receiving a nod from Mr. Brunner. Well, I was raised there by her. Naruto explained, getting a look of understanding from Mr. Brunner. Ah, and she must have explained about the gods to you last summer in preparation of you going to Camp Half-Blood this summer. Mr. Brunner reasoned aloud. That's right, but I still don't know who my godly parents are. All I know is that they are 3 of the goddesses. Naruto said, getting a surprised look from Mr. Brunner. I see, said Mr. Brunner with a contemplative look on his face. Well, I'm going to go back out to eat lunch, Mr. Brunner. Naruto said as he left the area after casting one last look at the 3 goddesses' statues. Mr. Brunner sat there for a moment longer looking at the 3 goddesses' statues while thinking, I wonder if it would explain his eyes and why he likes flames. After a few more minutes, he shrugged and headed outside after Naruto. The class had commandeered the museum steps and the fountain wall for seats to eat their lunch. Up in the sky, it looked like a big storm was brewing as some huge dark clouds were moving in over the city. Naruto remembered seeing on the news lately that floods, hurricanes, and storms were forming all over the world, leaving scientists baffled about the weather. Then there were the guys he saw more often with signs saying, "The end is near." Naruto sat on the edge of the fountain near Percy and Grover as they ate their lunch and chatted about different things. You get detention again? Grover asked, looking at Percy. Nah, not from Brunner. I just wish he would lay off me sometimes. I mean, I'm not a genius. Percy said, looking unhappily at his sandwich. Well, we already knew that, Percy. Naruto said, getting a punch in the arm from Percy. Okay. Can I have your apple? Grover said, shrugging, getting a chuckle out of Naruto as Percy handed over his apple. Naruto looked out at his class to see some of the boys pelting birds with small rocks. I swear boys are stupid sometimes. Naruto mumbled, then stopped as he realized what he just said. Why did I just say that? He thought to himself. The three began to chat about what they might do over the summer, when Naruto noticed Yansy and her goons approaching their location. He saw her pretend to trip and dump her lunch all over Grover. Oops, she said, grinning while her friends snickered at Grover. Percy jumped up angry, but Naruto stopped him while staring at Yansy with narrowed eyes. You just made my list, Boba Fett, be prepared. Naruto said icily, causing Yansy and her friends to pale and scamper away to another side of the fountain. Grover looked relieved, but Percy still looked angry and kept his eyes on Yansy. That's when something weird and unexplained happened. Yansy suddenly fell into the fountain, making a loud and audible splash, making everyone look at her, and caused Mrs. Dods to come over. Mrs. Dods, Percy and Naruto just pushed me. Yansy cried out, but neither Naruto or Percy were paying attention. Percy was trying to figure out what happened, and Naruto had narrowed his eyes as he had seen the tentacle of water pull Yansy into the water. It had confirmed his suspicions on Percy being a demigod. He just didn't know who his parent was. Mr. Jackson, Mr. Namikaze, come with me now. Mrs. Dods said after she had made sure Yansy was all right. Wait, it was me, I pushed her. Grover said suddenly while trying to stand up without his crutches. Mrs. Dods wasn't buying it and led Naruto and Percy back into the museum. Damn it, Grover mumbled to himself as he tried to get Mr. Brunner's attention. Naruto and Percy were following Mrs. Dods deeper into the museum and noticed that there were no people around the area. Naruto narrowed his eyes and figured that Mrs. Dods was finally making her move. But he couldn't figure out what her motivation was. They soon arrived in an area of the museum with a statue of Hades at the back of the room. Mrs. Dods turned around to them once they were in the room and focused on Percy. Now honey, did you really think we didn't know it was you? Mrs. Dods asked, focusing on Percy, causing Naruto to narrow his eyes at her. I'm sorry, Percy said as the first thing to come to mind. Now then, confess and we may take it easy on you, she said, causing Percy and Naruto to grow confused. What are you talking about? Naruto asked her. Ah yes, Mr. Namikaze. I figured you might have something to do with this as well. So tell your friend to hand it over or else. Mrs. Dods said, confusing them more. Just what am I supposed to have? Percy asked her, causing her to get mad. Stop acting like you don't know what I'm talking about, honeys. Mrs. Dods said angrily. But we don't. Percy began before Mrs. Dods interrupted him. That's it, I'm going to kill you and take it from you. Mrs. Dods said as she began to transform into a monster with beady black eyes, gray skin, and leathery black wings. Naruto pulled on his necklace, transforming it into his bow, as Percy looked at her in shock. Now tell me where the lightning bolt is. Mrs. Dods shouted as she took to the air to dodge a flaming arrow from Naruto. Before anything else could happen, the boys heard a shout. Percy, turn around. They turned around to see Mr. Brunner throwing something towards Percy from the entrance. Percy caught it and looked to see it was a pen. Uncap it, Percy, Mr. Brunner said urgently. Percy did, and the pen suddenly transformed into a sword. Wow, Percy said. Percy, now isn't the time, focus on this thing. Naruto said, causing Percy to nod and take a swing at her with the sword right as Naruto shot an arrow at her. Both connected at the same time, causing Mrs. Dods to let out a scream and turn into gold dust. Percy was shocked and turned to Naruto to see him just standing there with no weapon. What was that just now? Percy asked as he looked at the pen in his hand that had just been a sword. I don't know, Percy, let's get out of here. Naruto said, convincingly enough to get a nod from Percy. As they reached the exit of the museum, they were approached by Yansy. Where have you idiots been? Mrs. Kerr is about to take us back into the museum, she said, sneering at them. Who the hell is Mrs. Kerr? Percy asked while Naruto narrowed his eyes at the name. But all they got from her was her rolling her eyes and walking away muttering, idiots. They both also noticed her clothes were now completely dry instead of wet. They then walked up to Grover and asked him the same thing, and he gave the same answer but was stuttering slightly, so they knew he was lying. So they focused their attention on Mr. Brunner instead. Mr. Brunner looked up a little distracted. "Ah, that would be my pen. Please remember to bring your own writing utensil in the future, Mr. Jackson," he said. Okay," Percy said, looking confused as he handed over the pen to Mr. Brunner, who put it into his front pocket. "Sir, where is Mrs. Dodds?" Percy asked. "Who?" Mr. Brunner asked him, confused. "The other chaperone. Mrs. Dodds, the pre-algebra teacher," Percy asked as Naruto looked Mr. Brunner in the eye and winked and received a slight nod back. Mr. Brunner let a frown appear on his face, and sat forward, slightly concerned. "Percy, Naruto, there is no Mrs. Dodds on this trip. As far as I know, there has never been a Mrs. Dodds at Yansy Academy. Are you both feeling alright?" Mr. Brunner said in confusion. "Say what?" Percy asked, not believing what he was hearing. "You boys may have just got Mrs. Kerr's name mixed up with someone else, perhaps a past teacher at an old school. Don't worry about it, boys," Mr. Brunner said before wheeling off. "Come, it's time to head back into the museum, boys." As Mr. Brunner wheeled off, Percy looked at Naruto with a dumbfounded look on his face, with only one thing coming to mind to describe what just happened. "What the hell?" he said, causing Naruto to crack up laughing. It was weeks after the incident at the museum and people had still denied Mrs. Dodds' existence. Naruto had watched Percy spend days after the trip questioning everyone about Mrs. Dodds. But they would always look at him as if he had gone insane. Every one of them had said there had never been a Mrs. Dodds at Yansy and that Mrs. Kerr had been the math teacher since winter break ended. Naruto was relieved at that, as Percy was not yet ready to learn the truth about himself. However, there was one person who could not completely convince Percy and let him realize something was up. Much to Naruto's ire and Percy's happiness, Grover had always been a bad liar. When he lied, he stuttered, his brow began to get a little sweaty, and he always tried to avoid people's gazes. This is exactly what happened when Percy asked him about Mrs. Dodds. He would say he didn't know what Percy was talking about and that there had never been a teacher by that name at Yansy before. But Percy knew he was lying every time. Naruto made a mental note to teach Grover how to lie better when everything had settled down. Naruto had also spent this time getting payback on Nancy. He had already done numerous pranks on her, like paint bombing her room, hanging all her clothes from the school's flagpole, and pinning her to the wall with staples and a sign saying, "Please return this rabid animal to the wild where it belongs." It left the whole school in hysterics, and made Nancy avoid them like the plague. But right now the two were in Percy's dorm room studying for their upcoming Latin exam, or in Percy's case, trying to study. Grover had gone for a walk to clear his head, so it was just the two of them studying. This is impossible," Percy groaned as he threw his Latin textbook against the wall. "I try to read, but it either goes in one ear and out the other, or the words get all scrambled up," he said, sighing. "Don't give up, Percy, you'll get it eventually. I mean, we have dyslexia, it's always going to be harder for us than others," Naruto said, looking up from his book one of his moms had left him. This coming from the guy with a photographic memory, that also likes learning this stuff. Percy said grouchily. Naruto shrugged at that and looked back down at his book. "I can't control the fact I have that kind of memory, and as for liking this stuff, my mom liked it, so I do. It helps me feel closer to her," Naruto said back in answer. Percy looked down for a second at that, then picked his textbook up off the floor. "How am I supposed to remember difference between Chiron and Karen? It's completely the same," Percy said, aggravated. "Well, besides the fact that one has AI in it and the other has an A in it, one trains heroes and the other ferries the dead," Naruto explained, looking up from his book. Percy just sighed in aggravation at his textbook. "Why don't you ask Mr. Brunner for help? I'm sure he is still in his office, and since you are one of his favorite students, I'm sure he will give you a few tips," Naruto said, closing and laying down his book. "Do you think that would be okay?" Percy asked hopefully, looking up from his book slowly. "I don't see why not. He is a teacher after all. So if a student needs help, he is supposed to help, right? I'll come with you, I could use the break anyway," Naruto said, standing up and stretching. "Okay, let's do it, and thanks," Percy said, standing up and receiving a nod from Naruto. They left the room and headed towards their Latin teacher's office. As the two approached Mr. Brunner's office, they noticed his lights were still on and the door was open a little. As Percy was about to walk in, they heard voices inside and were surprised to find Grover talking with Mr. Brunner. Curiosity got the better of them and they leaned in closer so they could better hear what was being said. "Worried about Percy and Naruto, sir," they heard Grover say, surprising them both. Usually it was the other way around. "Alone this summer," Grover was saying. "I mean, a kindly one in school. Now that we know for sure, and they know too, we would only make matters worse by rushing them," Mr. Brunner said. "We need Percy to mature more and Naruto, so you don't need to worry about him." "But they may not have time. The summer solstice deadline," Grover begun before being cut off. "Will have to be resolved without Percy. Let him enjoy his ignorance while he still can, and as I said, Naruto can handle himself," Mr. Brunner said in a strict tone. "Sir, they saw her." Grover began to be cut off again. "His imagination," Mr. Brunner insisted. "The mist over both the students and staff will be enough to convince him of that." "But he has been asking questions, sir. I don't know how much longer I can lie to him," Grover said sadly. "You have to, Grover. I know it's difficult and that they're your friends now, but it will be safer," Mr. Brunner said in a kind tone. "Sir, I can't fail in my duties again." Grover's voice was full of emotion. "You know what that would mean." "You haven't failed, Grover," Mr. Brunner said kindly. "I should have seen her for what she was. Now let's just worry about keeping Naruto and Percy alive until next fall." Thud. Mr. Brunner stopped talking when Percy accidentally dropped his textbook, causing a loud thud to echo throughout the hallway. "Damn," Naruto thought before he grabbed Percy's arm and the textbook and quietly ran back to their dorm room. Back in the hallway, Mr. Brunner spoke. "Nothing," he mumbled. "My nerves haven't been right since the winter solstice." "Mine either," Grover said, "but I could have sworn." "Go back to your dorm," Mr. Brunner told him. "You have a long day of exams tomorrow." "Don't remind me," Grover groaned out. The lights turned out in Mr. Brunner's office and the two left, but as the two walked a strange clopping sound echoed. Back in the dorm room, Grover walked in to see Naruto and Percy studying. With Percy at the desk, and Naruto on Percy's bed leaning against the wall. "Hey guys," Grover said as he walked in and sat down on his bed. "Hey Grover," Percy and Naruto said together. "Man, Percy, you look terrible," Grover said. "It's just all this studying, Grover, you know how it is," Percy said. As Percy and Grover talked, Naruto looked over at Grover and wondered what they meant by the winter solstice. And wondered if it had to do with what the Fury was looking for back at the museum. He also wondered if he and Percy were in more danger than he first thought. The next afternoon, Naruto and Percy were leaving the 3-hour Latin exam both mentally exhausted. The test was a lot harder than they thought it would be. Naruto had it a little bit easier as his memory helped a little. But Percy had it worse as the words kept swimming around, and getting more jumbled. Even with all their studying, they weren't sure how well they had done. Both were worried that Mr. Brunner may have known they had heard his and Grover's conversation last night, but were relieved when he just called them over to hand them their grades. Percy had failed miserably and slumped, while Naruto had just barely got a passing grade. "Percy," Mr. Brunner said, "don't be discouraged about leaving Yansy. It's for the best. Percy isn't going to take this well," Naruto thought as he noticed the downcast look on his face. "Okay, sir," Percy mumbled. "I mean," Mr. Brunner said, wheeling his chair back and forth, like he wasn't sure what to say. "This isn't the right place for you. It was only a matter of time." "Right," Percy said, trembling. No, Mr. Brunner said. "Oh, confound it all. What I'm trying to say is, you're not normal, Percy." "That's nothing to be." "Thanks," Percy blurted out. "Thanks a lot, sir, for reminding me." Percy then picked up his backpack and walked out. "That could have gone better," Naruto said as Mr. Brunner looked to where Percy left and nodded. "Perhaps I was a little hard on him," Mr. Brunner said aloud. "You're just looking out for him. What person in a place of authority doesn't want that for the people they take care of?" Naruto said, getting a nod of appreciation from Mr. Brunner. "Well, what about you, Mr. Namikaze? What will you be doing now?" Mr. Brunner asked, getting a serious look from Naruto. "Some things have come up. I'll be going back to the orphanage earlier than expected to do some last-minute stuff. I have a feeling me and Percy will be joining you earlier at camp than expected," Naruto said seriously, getting a nod from Mr. Brunner. "Well then, keep yourself safe till then," Mr. Brunner said, getting a nod from Naruto. "You may want to watch for the next few days for use, sir. See you later, Mr. B." Naruto said as he grabbed his stuff and headed to the door. "I'll do that, Mr. Namikaze, goodbye," Mr. Brunner said before getting a contemplative look on his face. Later on that day, Naruto sat on the bus with Percy and Grover heading to the bus terminal with many other kids from their school on board. Naruto had already told Percy and Grover his plans of heading to the orphanage earlier than expected, saying something had come up. Grover was being really jumpy during the ride, looking around everywhere. Percy finally got fed up with it and asked him, "Looking for kindly ones?" Grover nearly jumped out of his seat and had a look that made him look like he was having a heart attack. What do you mean?" he finally asked. "We kind of overheard your conversation with Mr. Brunner last night. What was that all about?" Percy asked while Naruto gave him a serious nod. Grover's eye twitched. "How much did you hear?" "Not much. What's the solstice deadline?" Naruto asked seriously. "It's nothing, I was just talking to Mr. Brunner about how you guys might be getting overstressed or something cause of you believing in this Mrs. Dods character." Grover started before getting interrupted by Naruto. "You're a really bad liar, Grover," Naruto said, pointing at his ears. "Whenever you lie your ears get bright pink like they are now." Grover pulled out some grubby business cards from his front pocket. "Just take these, okay? In case you need me this summer." The card was in fancy script, which was murder on Naruto and Percy's dyslexic eyes, but they finally made out something like Grover Underwood, Keeper, Half-Blood Hill, Long Island, New York, 800-009-009. "Wow, fancy writing, something a big business would have," Naruto said. "Grover," Percy said, "what exactly are you supposed to be protecting us from?" he asked. However, before Grover could answer, there was a huge grinding noise under their feet. Black smoke began to pour out of the dashboard and the whole bus filled with a smell of rotten eggs. "Everyone out," the bus driver called, causing people to groan, as he pulled over to the side of the road. "Well, this is just messed up," Naruto said as everyone began peeling of the bus, and he noticed they were on some old country road. "Hey, what are they staring at?" Percy called, getting Naruto's and Grover's attention. Percy pointed to the other side of the road and they saw what looked like an old fruit stand. There was a whole variety of different colored fruit in the stand, making it look very colorful and tropical. However, there were 3 old ladies to the side of it in rocking chairs knitting one humongous sock. All 3 women looked very ancient in everyone's eyes, with pale faces wrinkled like fruit leather, silver hair tied back in white bandanas, and bony arms sticking out of bleached cotton dresses. Naruto narrowed his eyes when he realized they were looking right at Percy. "No, no, 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 no," Grover muttered under his breath as a look of terror appeared on his face. "Tell me they're not looking at you, Percy." "They are, aren't they?" he finally asked. "Yeah, weird, huh?" Percy said in a disbelieving tone. "You think those socks would fit me?" Naruto gave Percy a disbelieving look at that, then narrowed his eyes back on the old ladies. "This isn't the time to joke. Come on, let's get back on the bus," Grover said, grabbing both boys' arms. "Hey, watch it," they both said before an audible snip could be heard. They looked over to see that the yarn that one of the elderly ladies had in her hands was now cut by a giant pair of scissors another was holding. Naruto's eyes widened at the implications that could mean for Percy. "No, no, no," Grover kept muttering before he scuffled to the front of the bus and kicked it as hard as he could. Surprisingly, the bus shuddered, and the engine roared back to life. The passengers cheered. "Darn right," yelled the driver. He slapped the bus with his hat. "Everyone back on board, good thinking, kid," he said, giving Grover a pat on the back. "Come on, let's get back on the bus," Grover said, dragging them back on. When Naruto and Percy looked back to the other side of the road, they were surprised to see that the old ladies were gone with no trace they were ever there. "What the hell?" Percy thought. "I saw them there, I know I did." Naruto was lost in thought at that moment and nodded absent-mindedly to himself. As everyone got back on the bus and retook their seats, Grover was muttering quietly to himself, but Naruto and Percy heard what he was saying. "This is not happening. This can't be like last time. I cannot fail again. I already let Thalia down, I can't let them down too," they heard him say. Percy looked over at Grover then as Naruto was still lost in thought. "Let who down? Who is this Thalia girl? You got a girlfriend that we don't know about, Grover?" Percy asked him. "No, no," Grover said, waving his arms in front of him. "It's nothing but Percy, Naruto, you guys have to be careful, please. I can't protect you when you ask too many questions." Naruto gave Grover a deadpan look at that. While Percy looked at him skeptically. How is Grover supposed to protect them? They normally protected him. Grover, what the hell is going on? Percy asked, getting frustrated. What do you mean protect us? Grover looked around worried. Let me walk you home from the bus station, Percy. Promise me. Grover asked hurriedly. He was looking at him mournfully like he was already picking the kinds of flowers for his funeral. So Percy agreed, figuring that if he didn't, Grover would just freak out some more and draw attention to them. The rest of the journey back was silent before they finally arrived at the bus terminal. Well, I'll see you guys later sometime, Naruto said as Nate patted them both on the back and gave Grover a meaningful look, to which Grover nodded. Naruto then went and jumped onto his transfer bus, but looked back just in time to see Grover run to the bathroom and Percy jump into a cab, and shook his head sadly. A few hours later, Naruto had just walked into the front door of the orphanage and was looking around for Stephanie. Naruto, what are you doing back now? I thought you said you were going to be gone for a few more days? Stephanie asked him from the second floor landing. Some things came up. Can we talk in your office privately? Naruto asked her, receiving a nod and a wave to come on up. Once they were in her office, Naruto explained what had happened this year at the school. When he was done, they both had a grave looks on their faces. I see from what you've told me your friend probably will end up on the run from something and won't get to Camp Half-Blood till sometime tonight, probably after midnight. Stephanie said thoughtfully. Yeah, I had the same thought on the matter, Naruto said in exhaustion. Well, from what we have figured out, we know you have about 4 or 5 hours before you will need to head out. Why don't you go get all your stuff ready and make sure Kurama knows when to be ready to go, then rest for a while, Stephanie suggested, receiving a nod from Naruto, who got up and left the room after giving her a hug. Naruto entered his room and looked around, gauging what he would need to pack for his trip to Camp Half-Blood later tonight. Finally, he just decided to pack his version of a survival pack, which consisted of rope, first aid kit including 2 small squares of ambrosia and a vial of nectar, his extra katana and bow and arrows, a sleeping bag and tent, and some food. He also put his shoe knife into his boot for a hidden weapon. He then went outside to look for Kurama, who had decided back at the academy to make his own way home instead of riding the bus. He found him curled up at the base of a tree resting. He whistled and Kurama jumped up and was instantly at his side. We will be heading out tonight 2 hours before midnight for Camp Half-Blood, Naruto told Kurama as he looked down at him. Okay boss, I'll be ready then, Kurama yipped out. Good. Because something's happened on the way to the bus terminal that makes me think Percy will be making his way there tonight as well, whether he wants to or not, and whether he truly knows or not, Naruto said as he looked out at the area and thought. I won't ask what happened, but I'll be ready if we run into them. Kurama yipped out again. Good, now come on, we're going to rest for a while, Naruto said as he led the way back to his room and lay down on his bed. Later that night around midnight, Naruto and Kurama were running as fast as they could down the road towards Half-Blood Hill. They had just seen lighting arc down on the road ahead of them and heard an explosion. Naruto, knowing it was probably Percy, took off running while ordering Kurama to take his bigger form that was the size of a hellhound. Naruto's mind was racing over what creature could be attacking Percy and coming up with strategies to defeat it. As they crested the hill, Naruto cursed as he saw the Minotaur charging Percy, and he knocked his bow ready to fire an arrow. But his jaw dropped for a moment at what he saw happen next. Percy, in a moment of rage, had jumped at the Minotaur but went higher than expected and landed on its head. Naruto then saw him break off one of its horns but then get thrown off to the ground next to Percy. Naruto then used his Zippo to light the end of his arrow on fire and shot it at the monsters, hitting it in the leg. Naruto then ran forward as the monster bellowed in pain. He had already returned his bow to its pendant form on his necklace and changed his Zippo into its katana form. Percy grabbed Grover and run, I'll deal with this thing, Naruto shouted to get Percy's attention, also managing to get the monster's attention that immediately charged him. Naruto, what are you doing here? Percy asked in confusion as he watched Naruto dodge the monster, then take a swing at it, cutting off its other horn. Now is not the time, Percy, just grab Grover and run, Naruto said, receiving a nod from Percy, who grabbed Grover and began to move as fast as he could to the tree his mom pointed to. The Minotaur, noticing Percy getting away, had refocused on him and charged. Percy was just a few steps away from the tree when he was hit from behind by the monster and flung past the tree, landing at the feet of 2 people before passing out. Naruto had cursed when he saw the monster had charged after Percy and had ordered Kurama after it. Kurama had took off after it at a dead sprint, reaching it at the same time as it hit Percy. Kurama had then swiped it across the throat with his claws, causing it to erupt in a shower of gold sparks. "Good job, Kurama, let's go check on Percy and Grover," Naruto said when he reached him. He received a nod from Kurama, who had already changed back to his regular fox form, and they ran to where they saw Percy and Grover fall. Naruto saw Mr. Brunner and a girl looking over Grover and Percy, so he slowed his pace down and walked calmly towards them while checking out Mr. Brunner's new look. He was no longer in his wheelchair, but that didn't surprise Naruto much, as he had his suspicions on who he really was, and the next thing he saw confirmed them for him. Mr. Brunner had the lower half of a horse, marking him as a centaur. As he reached them, he noticed Mr. Brunner and the girl looking at him expectantly. "Hello, Mr. Brunner, or should I say Chiron," Naruto said as he bent down and picked up Kurama. He then looked at the girl and asked, "And you are?" I'm Annabeth Chase," the girl answered. "Naruto Namikaze," Naruto said, nodding his head to her. He looked at Grover and Percy. "They're unconscious, aren't they?" he asked, receiving a nod from them both. "Bring them inside," Chiron said. A few moments later, "It's good to see you again, Chiron," Naruto said. "It's good to see you again too, Naruto," Chiron said. "It seems you were right about us needing to keep an eye out for you and Percy." He added, Chiron, who is this?" Annabeth asked as she re-entered the room after checking on Percy and Grover. "Oh, forgive me, Annabeth, this is Naruto," Chiron said, nodding his head to her. "He is the boy I was telling you about that was staying at Stephanie's orphanage." He added after a moment, "Oh, okay, that explains why he wasn't freaking out when he saw you," Annabeth said after thinking for a moment. "Now then, Naruto, I will have a camper show you around and show you your cabin for later. Then you can come back here, and once Percy wakes up we will talk more," Chiron said as he walked towards the door. "Alright then," Naruto said as he followed him out. "Annabeth, please keep an eye on Percy, please," Chiron asked, receiving a nod from her. Once they were outside, Naruto looked around and whistled appreciatively. This place was huge. He noticed the hill from before was to their left and not far from them. He also noticed a group of cabins in a U-shaped pattern. "Clarice, Selena, come here please," Chiron shouted out to two girls off to the side of the cabins. Both girls looked up and saw Chiron and one of the new guys everyone was talking about. Naruto noticed that they were both pretty tall, but that one of them was a more petite girl with long black hair and blue eyes, while the other was more athletically built with a gruffer look and a fighter's appearance. She had red eyes and shorter black hair. Naruto thought they both looked pretty cute. "What?" the gruffer-looking girl asked as they reached them. "Clarice, I would like you and Selena to show Naruto here around the camp. I will have Annabeth show Percy around later when he wakes up," Chiron said to them. "Fine, got to welcome the newbie anyway," Clarice said with an evil smirk while Selena sighed. Naruto just raised an eyebrow at her. "So you're Clarice and Selena?" Naruto asked. "Well, I'm Naruto Namikaze," he added. "Well, it's nice to meet you, Naruto," Selena said, smiling. Clarice just nodded her head to him. "Well, come on, we haven't got all day," Clarice said, already walking away. Selena sighed again and gestured at Naruto to follow them. They soon caught up to her, and Selena and Clarice started to point out things in the camp as they showed him around. They passed the dining pavilion, the camp store, the armory, the stables, the archery range, the canoeing lake, the sing-along amphitheater, and the arena. As they passed each of them, either Clarice or Selena would comment on it. Naruto had smirked when he saw the archery range and the arena. They soon ended up back where they began, and Clarice and Selena then led him towards the center of the cabins. "Okay, listen closely because I am only going to say this once. There are 12 cabins in all, each one representing one of the 12 Olympian gods it was made for. Their kids are the only ones who live in there," Clarice explained to him, receiving a nod from Naruto. "Since you have just arrived and your Olympian parent hasn't claimed you yet, you will be staying in cabin 11, the Hermes cabin," Selena added, getting another nod from Naruto. "Whose kids are you two?" Naruto asked them. "The god of war," Clarice said, pointing to a red cabin with a 5 on the door. "The goddess of love," Selena said, pointing to a cabin with a blue roof and a 10 on the door. Naruto nodded at their answers and asked them to continue. "Right, Now we have the rest of the cabins. Number 1 is Zeus and it's vacant, number 2 is Hera and it's honorary, number 3 is Poseidon and it's vacant, number 4 is Demeter, number 5 is as you know Ares, number 6 is Athena, number 7 is Apollo, number 8 is Artemis which is mostly honorary except for when the hunters come, number 9 is Hephaestus, number 10 is as you know Aphrodite, number 11 is as you know Hermes, and number 12 is Dionysus. Clarice explained with Selena adding stuff in. Naruto looked at the cabins and nodded while noting there weren't any cabins for the minor gods and goddesses or for Hades or Hestia. Now it's time to officially welcome you, Clarice said, grinning wickedly, causing Selena to sigh. Others in the area grimaced at her words. Clarice was breaking in another newbie. Clarice quickly lunged forward trying to get Naruto into a headlock, but her eyes widened when he simply sidestepped her, causing her to land hard on the ground. Selena and the others in the area had broke out into giggles when she hit the ground. Clarice was about to jump to her feet and try again when she suddenly froze at the feeling of a knife at her throat. Everyone else had also got quit at that. That was a good try, Clarice, but I have been training in combat since I could walk, Naruto said as he moved the knife away from her throat and held out his hand to her. Clarice blushed at being seen losing against a newbie but accepted his help up. You got lucky this time, Naruto, Clarice said as she caught her balance. Sure he did, Clarice, Selena said while giggling, receiving a glare from Clarice. Well, how about you girls lead me back to the big house so Chiron knows the tour is done, Naruto said, trying to make sure they didn't get into an argument. Both Clarice and Selena nodded at that and lead him away. Once they were in the big house, Clarice and Selena turned to him. Well, Naruto, this is the end of the tour, Selena said with Clarice nodding. Yeah, it was nice meeting you girls, see you later, Naruto said while giving them a little wave as they began to walk away. Both girls waved back, then turned around and Naruto saw them become deep in conversation with each other. Naruto then walked into the living room where he saw Chiron playing a card game with someone he hadn't met yet. He also noticed he was back in his wheelchair. Ah, Naruto, welcome back. I see Clarice's little welcome plan didn't work, Chiron said when he finally noticed him. Yeah, it'll take more than that to get me, Naruto said while laughing. He then looked around at the other guy. Ah yes, Naruto, let me introduce you to Mr. D, Chiron said as he noticed Naruto looking at the guy. Naruto looked the guy over and noticed he had bloodshot eyes, while wearing a leopard print shot. He had messy black hair and was rocking the bearded look, and had a Diet Coke can in his hand. Well, I guess I must say it, welcome to Camp Half-Blood, Mr. D said in an annoyed voice. Well, let's see, you have a attitude. Look like you are experiencing a constant hangover, and you smell a little like grapes. You must be the wine god, nice to meet you, Naruto said in a cheery tone of voice. Well, you're correct. It's good to see not all demigods first arriving here are idiots, Dionysus said with a small smile. It's not that difficult, you just have to know what to look for, Naruto said, then turned to look at Chiron expectantly. Well, since Percy won't be fully awake till tomorrow, I would like you to stay near here, Chiron said to him when he noticed his look. Will do, sir, see you guys later, Naruto said, giving a little wave as he left the room. Well, that boy seems like he won't have much trouble fitting into our world, Mr. D commented as he turned back to his cards. Yes, I totally agree with you, Mr. D, Chiron said back as he placed his cards down. Naruto was just leaving the front door of the big house when he heard a shout of frustration from inside and snickered as he walked off. Naruto had just walked onto the porch of the big house to see Grover hand Percy a cup, and watched him literally chug the whole thing. How do you feel, Percy? He heard Grover ask. Like I could throw Nancy Bobofit 100 yards, was Percy's reply. That's good, Grover said. I don't think you could drink any more of that anyway. What do you mean? Percy asked him. Well, what he means, Percy, Naruto began, causing them to jump and spin towards him. Is that is nectar, the drink of the gods. Any mortal who drinks it literally burns up from the inside out. But demigods like you and me can have small amounts like a cup full to heal us of injuries, any more though and it will affect us just like any other mortal, he explained, causing Percy to look at him strangely and Grover to sigh. What do you mean, drink of the gods? Percy asked, confused. Come on, Chiron and Mr. D are waiting, Grover said, taking Percy's empty cup and setting it down on an empty table. Grover led them into the house and then into the living room. Mr. Brunner, was Percy's ecstatic reply when he noticed him. Oh, Percy and Naruto, good, Mr. Brunner said. Now we have 4 for Pinnacle. He added as he motioned them to the 2 empty chairs. Now then, Percy, this is Mr. D. He is the camp director. Mr. Brunner said, pointing to the man opposite of him. Mr. D looked at Percy with bloodshot eyes and heaved a great sigh. Oh, I suppose I must say it. Welcome to Camp Half-Blood. There, now don't expect me to be glad to see you, he said grouchily. Thanks, Percy said as he scooted away from Mr. D. He knew what a man looked like when he was hitting the happy juice from his time with his stepfather. If Mr. D was a stranger to alcohol, then he was a satyr. Annabeth, Mr. Brunner called, and she stepped forward. This young lady nursed you back to health, Percy. Annabeth, could you go check on Percy's bunk in cabin 11 for me? Mr. Brunner told Percy, then asked Annabeth. Sure, Chiron, Annabeth said. Naruto then watched as Percy and Annabeth looked at each other for a moment and smirked. You drool in your sleep, Annabeth finally said, causing Naruto to crack up laughing as she left. What about you, Naruto? What are you doing here? Percy asked angrily when Naruto finally calmed down. Like I told you the other day, Percy, some things came up and I had to go back to the orphanage to get all my stuff together. It was to make sure I got here when you did, Naruto explained, causing Percy to look at him in shock for a moment. Then he turned back to Mr. Brunner. So, you work her, Mr. Brunner? Percy asked him. Not Mr. Brunner, Chiron said. I'm afraid that was a pseudonym. You may call me Chiron, he told Percy. Okay, Percy said, totally confused. And Mr. D, does that stand for something? He asked. Everyone stopped and stared at him for a moment. On that happy note, Chiron, I'm going to go wait outside as I know most of what you're going to talk to Percy about, Naruto said, receiving a nod from Chiron as he got up and left. A few moments later, Naruto saw Chiron walk out in his full form with Percy behind him. Ah, Naruto, come along, there are a few more places you should see in camp that you weren't shown yesterday, Chiron said when he noticed him. Naruto nodded and followed him and Percy off the porch. As they walked, they passed the volleyball pit. Several of the campers nudged each other, and one pointed at the Minotaur horn in Percy's hand and said, It's them. Naruto snorted in amusement at them, but saw Percy was feeling rather nervous at all their stares. Don't worry about them, Percy, Naruto said, placing his hand on Percy's shoulder. Percy relaxed a little and smiled at Naruto gratefully. Naruto saw Percy look back towards the big house and then turned towards Chiron. What's up there? Percy asked, pointing to the top front window. Just the attic, Chiron said, his smile fading as he looked where Percy was pointing. Somebody lives there? Percy asked him. No, not one living thing, Chiron said with finality. Nothing living, huh? Naruto thought to himself. Come along, you two, there's still lots to see, Chiron said, his light-hearted tone coming out a little forced. They walked through the camp's strawberry fields, watching campers collect them while satyrs were here or there playing their reed pipes. Chiron told them that they used the strawberry fields to pay for the camp's expenses through export to businesses in New York and on Mount Olympus. He also told them that it took no effort to grow them, as Mr. D had the effect of making fruit-bearing plants grow like crazy. Grover won't get into too much trouble, will he? Percy asked Chiron. I mean, he was a good protector, really, he added after a moment. Chiron sighed and shed his tweed jacket, draping it of his horseback like a saddle. Grover has big dreams, Percy. Perhaps bigger than reasonable. To reach his goal, he must first prove great courage by succeeding as a keeper, finding a camper and bringing him safely to Half-Blood Hill. But he did that, Percy shouted. I might agree with you, Chiron said, but it is not my place to judge. Dionysus and the Council of Cloven Elders must decide. I'm afraid they may not see this assignment as a success. After all, Grover lost you in New York. Then there's the unfortunate fate of your mother. Also the fact that Grover was unconscious when you dragged him over the property line, and Naruto was the one to kill the Minotaur. The council might question whether this shows any courage on Grover's part. Naruto could tell that Percy wanted to protest, and that he felt guilty about giving Grover the slip. He'll get a second chance, won't he? Percy asked hopefully. Chiron winced. I'm afraid that was Grover's second chance, Percy. The council was not anxious to give him another either, after what happened the first time 5 years ago. Olympus knows, I advised him to wait longer before trying again. He is still so small for his age. How old is he? Naruto asked, entering the conversation. Oh, 28, Chiron answered. What, and he's in 6th grade? Percy asked unbelievingly. Satyrs mature half as fast as humans, Percy, Naruto. Grover has been the equivalent of a middle school student for the past 6 years. Chiron explained. Well, that's interesting. Naruto mumbled. That's horrible. Percy said, imagining having to be in the same grade for that long. Quite, Chiron agreed. At any rate, Grover is a late bloomer, even by satyr standards, and not yet very accomplished at woodland magic. Alas, he was anxious to pursue his dream. Perhaps now he will find some other career. That's not fair, Percy said. What happened the first time? Was it really so bad? Chiron looked away quickly. Naruto saw a sad look on his face and noticed he was looking at the tree on the boundary line. Let's move along, shall we? Chiron said, walking ahead with them following. Chiron, Percy said. If the gods and Olympus and all that are real. Yes, child? Chiron asked, looking at him. Does that mean the underworld is real, too? Percy asked him. Chiron's expression darkened. Yes, child. He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. There is a place where spirits go after death. But for now, until we know more. I would urge you to put that out of your mind. What do you mean, until we know more? Percy asked. Come, Percy, Naruto, let's see the woods. Chiron said, as if he didn't hear him. As they got closer, Percy and Naruto noticed how huge the forest was. It looked ancient, and took up at least a quarter of the valley they were in. It had tall, thick trees that were close together, and looked like no one had been inside since the Native Americans. The woods are stocked, if you care to try your luck. But go armed, Chiron said. Stocked with what? Percy asked. Armed with what? You'll see. Capture the flag is Friday night. Do you have your own sword and shield? Chiron said, then asked them both. I don't use shields, but I do have my own sword, and my own bow and arrow. Naruto said, pointing to his necklace, then pulling out his zippo. Chiron nodded, then turned to Percy. My own what? Percy asked, shocked. No, Chiron said. I don't suppose you do. I think a size 5 will do. I'll visit the armory later. Chiron said thoughtfully. Chiron turned around to continue the tour when Naruto spoke up. Chiron, I have already seen the rest yesterday. I'll be at the cabins when you get done. Naruto said, receiving a nod from Chiron as he walked off after patting Percy on the shoulder once more. An hour later, Percy and Chiron walked into the center of the cabins and saw that Naruto and Annabeth were having a discussion over the books they were holding in front of the 11th cabin. As they reached them, they turned around, and Annabeth looked Percy over critically. Naruto smirked as he noticed it. Annabeth, Chiron said, I have master's archery class at noon. Take Percy from here. Yes, sir, Annabeth said. Cabin 11, Chiron told Percy, gesturing towards the doorway of the cabin. Make yourself at home. He then left them. Well, Percy, let's go introduce you to your cabin mates. Seeing as Naruto meet them yesterday. Annabeth said as she turned towards the door of the cabin. They look inside of the cabin. Out of all the cabins, it looked the most like a regular old summer camp cabin, with emphasis on the old. The threshold was worn down, and the brown paint was peeling. Over the doorway was one of those doctor's symbols, a winged pole with 2 snakes wrapped around it. Inside, it was packed with people. Both boys and girls, way more people than there were bunk beds. Sleeping bags spread all over on the floor. It looked like a gym where the Red Cross had set up an evacuation center. Percy stood in the doorway beside Naruto, watching as he waved at a few of them who waved back. But most of them were staring at him. Well, Annabeth said, go on. Percy entered into the cabin and tripped coming in the door, making a total fool of himself. Good impression, Percy, Naruto said cheekily, getting a few snickers from the campers. He and Annabeth then walked inside. Percy Jackson, meet cabin 11. Annabeth said. Regular or undetermined? Somebody asked. He is undetermined, just like me, guys. Naruto said, and everybody groaned. A guy who looked around 19 with sandy blonde hair and mischievous eyes stepped forward. Now guys. That's what we're here for. Welcome, Percy. You can have that spot on the floor right over there, next to where Naruto's is. He said with a kind smile, though it was kind of marred a little by the scar that ran from his right eye all the way down to his jaw. This is Luke, Annabeth said, and her voice sounded different somehow. Naruto just smirked, noticing her blush, while Percy glanced at her. She noticed them looking at her and her expression hardened again. He's your counselor for now. For now? Percy asked confused. You're undetermined, Luke explained patiently. They don't know what cabin to put you two in, so you're here. Cabin 11 takes all newcomers, all visitors. Naturally, we would. Hermes, our patron, is the god of travelers. Naruto noticed Percy look at his spot on the floor, then the Minotaur horn in his hand, then shake his head a little. Naruto guessed he was going to mark his spot with it, but then remembered that Hermes was also the god of thieves. How long will I be here? Percy asked. Good question, Luke said. Until you're determined. How long will that take? Percy asked. All the campers laughed. It could take a long time, Percy. Naruto said, smirking at him. Come on, Annabeth told Percy. I still need to tell you about the rest of the cabins. Alright, I'm coming, Percy said with Naruto following them. Once they were outside and a few feet away, Annabeth turned to Percy. Jackson, you have to do better than that. She said. What? Percy asked, causing Naruto to shake his head at him. Annabeth rolled her eyes and mumbled under her breath. I can't believe I thought you were the one. What's your problem? Percy asked in an angry tone. All I know is, I fought some bull guy and one more thing, and it was Naruto that killed him. Don't talk like that, Annabeth said. Do you know how many kids at this camp wish they had your chance? To get killed? Percy asked, still angry. To fight the Minotaur. What do you think we trained for? She asked him sarcastically. Percy shook his head. Look, if the thing I fought really was the Minotaur, the same one in the stories. Yes, she said. Then there's only one. Percy said. Yes, Annabeth said. And he died, like, a gazillion years ago, right? Theseus killed him in the labyrinth. So, Percy said. Monsters don't die, Percy. They can be killed, but they don't die, Naruto said, finally speaking, causing Percy to look at him. They don't have souls. You can dispel them for a while, maybe a whole lifetime if you're lucky. But they are primal forces, archetypes. Eventually they reform. What? Percy said, disbelief coloring his voice. The fur. I mean your math teacher, she is still out there. Annabeth said, causing Naruto to look at her with a raised eyebrow, wondering how she knew about that, while Percy looked at her in shock. How did you know about Mrs. Dods? Percy asked. You talk in your sleep. Annabeth said, causing Naruto to snicker. You almost called her something. A fury? They're Hades' torturers, right? Annabeth glanced at the ground nervously, as if she expected it to open up and swallow her. You shouldn't call them by name, even here. We call them the kindly ones, if we have to speak of them at all. Look, is there anything we can say without it thundering? Percy asked. And why do I have to stay in cabin 11 anyway? Why is everybody so crowded together? There are plenty of empty bunks right over there. Percy fired off, then pointed at the first few cabins. Go ahead and try to use them, Percy. I guarantee you won't make it through the doors of any of them. Naruto said seriously, while Annabeth turned pale at his question. What he means is you don't just choose a cabin, Percy. It depends on who your parents are, or your parent. Annabeth said. My mom is Sally Jackson, Percy said. She works at the candy store in Grand Central Station. At least, she used to. I'm sorry about your mom, Percy. But that's not what I mean. I'm talking about your other parent. Your dad, Annabeth said. He's dead, I never knew him. Percy said. Your father's not dead, Percy. Naruto said. Percy looked confused. What do you mean, Naruto? Your father is a god. Naruto said. What? Percy asked in shock. How else would you be allowed here? You are a demigod, Percy. Naruto said. How do I know I am a demigod, as they are called? Percy asked. Usually, demigods are diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. Annabeth said. How does dyslexia and ADHD help? Percy asked. Well, for one, Percy, the reason why we have dyslexia is because as the child of a god or goddess, our brains are programmed to read ancient Greek and Latin. Naruto said. And the ADHD, how does it help? Percy asked them. ADHD is your battlefield reflexes. In a real fight, they'd keep you alive. As for the attention problems, that's because you see too much, Percy, not too little. Your senses are better than a regular mortal's. Then there is, Annabeth said. She wanted to say more but was interrupted by someone very familiar to her and Naruto. Which caused Naruto to shake his head. He just knew Percy was going to say something stupid to her, with his habit of speaking without thinking first. Well, a newbie, the familiar voice said. They looked towards the voice's direction. They saw Clarice with two of her siblings. Clarice, Annabeth sighed. Why don't you go polish your spear or something? She asked sarcastically. Sure, Miss Princess. So I can run you through with it Friday night. Clarice said. Eras korakas. Annabeth said, which in Greek was, go to the crows. You don't stand a chance. Well, pulverize you. Clarice said, but her eye twitched. Perhaps she wasn't sure she could follow through on the threat. She turned towards Naruto. Hello Clarice, how's Selena? Naruto asked her while smirking. Hello Naruto, she's good. She's hanging out with some of her siblings right now. Clarice said in a neutral tone. She turned to Percy. Who's this little runt with you? She asked. Percy Jackson, Naruto said. Meet Clarice, daughter of Ares. Percy blinked. Like, the war god? He asked. Clarice sneered. You got a problem with that? She asked. No, Percy said, recovering his wits. It explains the bad smell. He said, causing Naruto to face palm at his words. We have an initiation ceremony for newbies Prissy. Clarice growled out. Percy. He corrected. Whatever. Come on, I'll show you. Clarice said. Clarice? Annabeth tried to say. Stay out of this wise girl. Clarice said. Before Percy could do anything, Clarice grabbed him in a headlock and started dragging him towards the bathroom. He dropped his Minotaur horn in the process, and Annabeth grabbed it up for him. She then turned to Naruto about to say something before he interrupted. Don't ask, I'm not going to stop this. Percy needs to understand that he can't always say the first thing that comes out of his mouth, and that he needs to think before he speaks. Naruto said, earning a nod from Annabeth. Percy was kicking and punching, but to no avail. Clarice had a grip like iron. She dragged him into the girls' bathroom. There was a line of toilet stalls on one side and shower stalls on the other. It smelled just like any other public bathroom. Clarice's friends were laughing. Percy had tried to find the strength he had used when he fought the Minotaur. But it just wasn't there. Like he's big 3 material. Clarice said as she pushed him towards one of the toilets. Yeah, right. The Minotaur probably fell over laughing, because of how stupid looking he was. One of her friends snickered out. Naruto and Annabeth stood in the doorway of the bathroom watching. Naruto kept his hand on Annabeth's shoulder to keep her from interfering. Clarice and her friends forced Percy to his knees, and Clarice began to push his head towards the toilet. Percy began to struggle like crazy. They heard the plumbing rumble and saw the pipes shudder. Clarice's friends backed up and her grip loosened on Percy's hair. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he saw the water begin to move, and he grabbed Annabeth before diving out of the bathroom door. At that exact moment Clarice and her friends were blasted out of the bathroom by a huge torrent of water, before it suddenly stopped. Percy walked out of the bathroom to see Clarice and her friends spread out on the ground dripping wet, and saw Naruto helping Annabeth up from the ground. You're dead, new boy. You're totally dead, Clarice said with a look of absolute hatred on her face. You want to? Percy began before Naruto covered his mouth with his hand. Shut up Percy, you have a big mouth, Naruto said. And if you keep using it without thinking you'll end up getting yourself killed. He added, causing Percy to look away for a moment. He then looked towards Clarice. Clarice, Naruto called. She looked towards him. Go get yourself cleaned up in your cabin. We don't need another mess right now. Clarice nodded, and she and her friends took off to their cabin. He then removed his hand from Percy's mouth. What? Percy snapped, noticing Annabeth staring at him. How did you do that? Annabeth asked him. I don't know. Percy told her truthfully. What are you thinking, Annabeth? Naruto asked her, noticing her thoughtful look. I'm thinking that I want both of you on my team for capture the flag. Annabeth said. Naruto had grinned at her words. Alright then. Well, I have something I need to do, and you need to show Percy the rest of the camp. Naruto said as he began to walk off. Alright, talk to you later, Naruto. Annabeth said, waving goodbye. Yansy ya man, Percy said, also waving. Naruto headed off to the Hephaestus cabin's workshop. He had something he thought they might be interested in. As he walked into the workshop he saw many kids working on many weapons and armor, all in various stages of completion. Hello, who are you? A deep voice from the left of him asked. Naruto turned and saw a huge guy looking at him from one of the workbenches. I'm Naruto Namikaze, nice to meet you. Naruto said, walking up to him and holding out his hand to him. Charles Beckendorf, what brings you here? Charles asked as he shook his hand. Well, I had this blueprint I made on a two-way low-frequency radio headset, that I thought I could get to work for demigods by using celestial bronze as the casing for the machinery. Naruto said, piquing Charles' interest. Okay, and how does that bring you here? Charles asked, interested in his answer. Well, I was hoping I could get the help of Hephaestus's children in making enough for the campers, and we could test it out at Friday's Capture the Flag game, with Chiron telling me whether it broadcasts our location or not, like usual electronic devices do. Naruto said, getting a look of understanding from Charles. Well, as the head counselor for our cabin, I'll see what I can do. Just leave the blueprints with me and I will get it done. Charles said, grinning while holding his hand out for the blueprints. I can't wait to see the end result for them, good luck. Naruto said as he handed over the blueprints and began to leave. Charles was already focused on the blueprints by the time Naruto left. Naruto headed towards the lake after leaving the workshop and saw Percy and Annabeth deep in conversation on the pier and headed their way. Then who's your dad? He heard Percy ask once he was in hearing distance of them. Naruto saw Annabeth stiffen at the question, and shook his head at Percy sadly. My dad is a professor at West Point, she said. I haven't seen him in a long time, he teaches American history. He's human? Percy asked, shocked, causing Naruto to shake his head sadly at him again for the way he thought. What? You assume it has to be a male god who finds a female attractive, how east is that? Annabeth stated, upset. Yeah, Percy, I thought you already understood the point that goddesses also did this stuff when I told you about the gifts my mom left me, remember? Naruto said, causing them to turn to him, shocked he was there before Percy nodded to him, remembering that conversation. Yeah, I remember. So your mom is a goddess? Percy asked. Well, my moms are goddesses. Naruto said, shocking them. What do you mean moms? Annabeth asked. Well, from what Stephanie told me, I know that 3 of the goddesses used some sort of ritual involving theirs and my father's blood to make me. Naruto said, causing Annabeth to nod in understanding, while Percy looked at him confused for a second, before shaking his head and turning to Annabeth. Well, who's your mom then? He asked her. Cabin 6. Annabeth stated. Meaning? Percy asked her. Annabeth straightened. Athena, goddess of wisdom and battle. Percy looked at her skeptically for a second. And my dad? He asked her. Undetermined, Annabeth stated. Like I told you before, no one knows. Except my mom. She knew. Percy said. Maybe not, Percy. Gods don't always reveal their identities. Annabeth said, looking at him and Naruto. My dad would have, he loved her. Percy stated, sure of the fact. Annabeth gave Naruto a cautious look and he nodded to her, causing her to sigh. Maybe you're right, Percy, maybe he'll send a sign. That's the only way to know. Your father has to send a sign claiming you as his son. Sometimes it happens. You mean sometimes it doesn't? Percy asked, shocked. Naruto sighed. The gods are busy people, Percy. They have lots of kids and they don't always, well, sometimes they don't care about us, Percy, they ignore us. He said sadly. He could see Percy in deep thought for a moment at that. So I'm stuck here, Percy said. That's it, for the rest of my life. It depends, Naruto said. Some demigods can get by with just a few months of training, and spend the rest of the time in the mortal world. In their cases, they're just not strong or important enough for most monsters to focus on. But for some of us, it's too dangerous to leave. We're year-rounders. In the mortal world, we attract monsters. They sense us, and come to challenge us. Most of the time, they'll ignore us until we're old enough to cause trouble, about 10 or 11 years old. But after that, most demigods either make their way here, or get killed off. A few manage to make it in the outside world and become famous. Believe me, if I told you their names, you would know them. Some don't even realize they're demigods. But very, very few, are like that. Annabeth told him. About monsters they can't get in here? Percy asked her. Annabeth shook her head. Not unless they're intentionally stalked in the woods or are summoned by somebody on the inside. Why would anyone want to summon a monster? Percy asked. To use for practice fights or practical jokes. Naruto said with a shrug. What do you mean practical jokes? Percy asked him. Not now, Percy, I'll explain later. Naruto said after receiving a look from Annabeth. The borders are sealed to keep mortals and monsters out. From the outside, a mortal would look in and see nothing unusual, but a big strawberry farm. Annabeth told them. So you're a year-rounder? Percy asked Annabeth. Annabeth nodded. From under the collar of her t-shirt she pulled a leather necklace with 5 clay beads of different colors. It was just like others they had seen, except Annabeth's also had a big gold ring strung on it, like a college ring. I've been here since I was 7, she said. Every August, on the last day of the summer session, every camper gets a bead for surviving another year. I've been here longer than most of the counselors, and they're in college. Why did you come so young? Percy asked, causing Naruto to shake his head again, and add tact to the list of things Percy needed to learn. Annabeth twisted the ring on her necklace. None of your business, she snapped at him. Percy, Naruto said, you can't question people on their personal life. Annabeth gave him a grateful look, to which he nodded. Oh, sorry, Percy said. He stood there in silence for a moment. So, I could just walk out of here right now if I wanted to? Percy asked her. It would be suicide, but you could, with Mr. D or Chiron's permission. But they wouldn't give permission until the end of the summer session, unless, Annabeth said, trailing off at the end. Unless what? Naruto asked her, though he had a clue as to what it was. You were granted a quest. But that hardly even happens, the last time. Her voice trailed off again. Both Percy and Naruto could tell from her tone that the last time hadn't gone so well. Back in the sick room, Percy said. When you were feeding me that stuff. Ambrosia. Annabeth supplied for him. Yeah, you asked me something about the summer solstice. Percy said. Annabeth's shoulders tensed. So you do know something? Well, no. Back at school, me and Naruto overheard Grover and Chiron talking about it. Grover mentioned the summer solstice. He said something about we didn't have much time, because of the deadline. What did that mean? Percy explained, then asked her. Annabeth clenched her fists. I wish I knew. Chiron and the satyrs, they know, but they won't tell me. Something is wrong on Olympus, something pretty major. Last time I was there, everything seemed so normal. You've been to Olympus? Percy asked, shocked. Some of us year-rounders, Luke, Clarice, and I and a few others, we took a field trip during the winter solstice. That's when the gods have their big annual council. She said, how did you get there? Naruto asked her, intrigued. The Long Island Railroad, of course. You get off at Penn Station. Empire State Building, special elevator to the 600th floor. She explained. She then looked at them like they should have known already. You are a New Yorker, right? She asked them. Oh, sure. Percy said while Naruto rolled his eyes. Right after we visited, Annabeth continued. The weather got weird, as if the gods were fighting. A couple of times since, I've overheard satyrs talking. The best I can figure out is that something important was stolen. And if it isn't returned by the summer solstice, there's going to be trouble. When you two came, I was hoping. I mean, Athena can get along with just about anybody, except for Ares. And of course she's got the rivalry with Poseidon. But, I mean, aside from that, I thought we could work together. I thought you might know something. Percy and Naruto shook their heads. I've got to get a quest, Annabeth muttered to herself. I'm not too young if they would just tell me the problem. Later on, Naruto was back in cabin 11 talking and joking around with the others, while keeping an eye on Percy, who was sitting in a corner looking kinda down. He watched as Luke walked up to Percy with some toiletries and began talking to him. He kept his eyes on them during the entire conversation until he heard a horn blowing in the distance. Cabin 11 fall in, he heard Luke shout. The whole of cabin 11, about 28 kids, filed into the courtyard. They lined up in order of seniority, so of course Percy and Naruto were last in line. Campers came from the other cabins except for the first three and cabin 8, which had looked normal during the daytime, but was now glowing silver as the sun went down. Naruto's eyes lingered on it for a moment, then moved to cabin 6 and lingered there for a moment too. He had felt some kind of pull to the two cabins, but it was faint, so he brushed it off. They marched off to the dining pavilion. Satyrs, naiads, and nymphs started joining them from different parts of the camp. In all there were about 100 campers, a few dozen satyrs, and a dozen assorted nymphs and naiads. At the pavilion, torches blazed around the marble stone columns. A central fire burned in a bronze brazier the size of a bathtub. Each cabin had its own table, covered in white cloth trimmed in purple. 4 of the tables were empty, but cabin 11's was way overcrowded. Percy and Naruto sat near the edge of the bench. They saw Grover sitting at table 12 with Mr. D, and a couple of plump blonde boys who looked just like Mr. D. Chiron stood to one side, the picnic table being way too small for a centaur. Annabeth sat at table 6 with a bunch of serious-looking athletic kids, all with her gray eyes and honey blonde hair. Clarice sat at table 5. She'd apparently gotten over being hosed down, because she was laughing and belching right along with the rest of her siblings. Finally, Chiron pounded his hoof upon the marble floor of the pavilion, and everybody fell silent. He raised his glass. To the gods, he bellowed. Everybody else raised their glasses including Naruto and Percy and bellowed back. To the gods. Wood nymphs came forward carrying platters of food, grapes, apples, strawberries, cheese, bread, and barbecue. Naruto called out what drink he wanted to his cup and watched it fill up, noticing Percy watch then copy him. Here you go Percy, Naruto. Luke said handing them a big platter of barbecue. Both of them then began loading their plates full, with a little of everything on the table. It's time to give our burnt offerings to the gods Percy, come on. Naruto said. What do you mean burnt offerings? Percy asked him. Naruto just pointed to the brazier and Percy noticed the other campers putting a small portion of their meal into the fire. They got in line behind Luke and watched him make his offering while muttering. Hermes. Naruto was next. Whoever you three are please claim me soon. Naruto thought as he dropped 2 rolls and some grapes in the fire. As he was lifting his head up Naruto could have sworn he saw 3 smiling faces in the flames, and just smiled back. He then stepped back and waited for Percy to make his offering before heading back to his seat with him. When everybody had returned to their seats and finished eating their meals, Chiron stomped his hoof again for attention. Mr. D got up with a sigh. Yes, I suppose I'd better say hello to all you brats. Well, hello. Our activities director, Chiron, says the next capture the flag is Friday. Cabin 5 presently hold the laurels. A bunch of cheering went up from Cabin 5's table. Personally, Mr. D continued. I could care less, but congratulations. Also, I should tell you that we have 2 new campers today. Perry Wilson, Chiron murmured something to him. Percy Jackson, Mr. D corrected. And Naruto Namikaze. Now run along to your silly campfire. Go on. Everybody cheered. They all headed down toward the amphitheater, where Apollo's cabin let us sing along. They sang camp songs about gods and ate s'mores and joked around, and the funny thing was that Percy didn't feel that anyone was staring at him anymore. He felt like he was home. Naruto, I feel like I am home. Percy said turning to him. Naruto just nodded his head with a smile on his face at that. Within the next few days Naruto and Percy settled into a routine that felt almost normal. They were getting lessons from satyrs, nymphs, and a centaur. Each morning Percy and Naruto took ancient Greek from Annabeth, where she learned Naruto already knew both Greek and Latin as well as English. They talked about the gods and goddesses in present tense, which was weird for Percy. The rest of the day they rotated through outdoor activities, looking for something they were good at. Chiron had them line up for archery first, and they quickly found out that Percy was no good with a bow and arrow. While Naruto, well, he surprised everybody. Hey Chiron, how far back can we move the targets on the range? Because as you know I have been using a bow for a while and I want to test my limit. Naruto asked him. Chiron paused and thought for a moment. Well, we can move the targets back about 1,000 yards, but I've only ever seen the twins Apollo and Artemis hit a mark at that range. Chiron told him. Excellent, Naruto said. I would like to try at that range. The last range I was at only went to 700 yards. Okay if you want. Just don't be discouraged if you miss. Chiron said and moved Naruto's target for him, getting everyone's attention. Not possible. Naruto heard some of the Apollo campers say. Okay Naruto, take your shot. Chiron said when he returned to Naruto's side. Naruto knocked his bow and lined up his shot. He closed his eyes for a moment to calm his body down, entering a almost meditative state. Chiron noticed and smirked, wondering if Naruto would actually make the shot in his current state. Naruto opened his eyes and took in a breath, then released it at the same time he let the arrow fly. Then with quickness Chiron barely saw drew another arrow and fired it as well. Everyone watched as the 2 arrows flew, the first embedding itself dead center in the target with the second splitting it straight down the center. Everyone gasped in shock at the amazing skill Naruto had just showed, and Chiron's eyes widened. Well Naruto, it seems you have very good archery skills to match the twins. Chiron said. Hey, he could be a sibling of ours. One of the Apollo campers said excitedly. Sorry to disappoint guys, but my Olympian parent is female. Naruto told them. After that they moved on to foot racing. Neither Percy or Naruto were very good at that. The wood nymph instructors had left them in the dust. They said not to worry about it, as they had excellent practice running away from lovesick gods. But both were still put out at being beaten in a race by a tree. Wrestling was next. Naruto was better at this than Percy, mainly because every time Percy stepped onto the mat Clarice would pulverize him. He had just given up after the first 3 times, and just watched Naruto continue the class. Then they had canoeing. It was the only class they had so far that Percy was better than Naruto at. But that didn't encourage Percy, as he didn't see that as a skill to be proud of. Both of them knew that the senior campers and counselors were watching them, trying to figure out who their parents were. But they weren't having an easy time figuring it out for either of them. "Man Naruto, how are you so good at all the combat-oriented classes?" Percy asked him sadly. "Don't be sad, Percy, I just have a little more experience than you do. You're doing well for your first time," Naruto said, encouragingly, getting Percy to smile. "Thanks man," Percy said. "No problem, what's next on the schedule?" Naruto asked him. "We have our first sword fighting lesson," Percy told him. "Oh, cool," Naruto said. Everybody from Cabin 11 gathered in the sword fighting arena, where Luke was the instructor. He had everybody start off with basic sword maneuvers, using some straw-filled dummies with Greek armor. At first everyone just stared at Naruto as he used a Japanese katana and did different maneuvers than Luke was telling them to do. "What are you doing, Naruto?" one of the campers asked him. "Well, I've been trained in Kenjutsu since I was little, since it was the style my clear-sighted father used. So I'm doing the basic maneuvers for my style," Naruto said, gaining a nod from them. After that everyone went back to doing the maneuvers. Naruto noticed Percy was doing okay in the maneuvers, but also noticed that he couldn't find a blade balanced enough for him. "Okay everyone, before we begin dueling in pairs, I'm going to test Naruto's style to see if he needs to continue training with us. If not, then he will use this time to train more in his own style," Luke explained as he led Naruto to the center of the arena with everyone watching on. "Good luck," one of the campers told Naruto. "Luke is the best swordsman in the last 100 years. Naruto just smirked. "Good, that means I'll be able to enjoy this fight," he said, getting into his stance. Luke mirrored Naruto and got into his own stance. They stared each other down for a moment, before Luke suddenly lunged at Naruto, bringing his sword down in a diagonal arch, aiming to cut Naruto from his right shoulder to his left hip. Naruto nimbly dodged his attack to the left and appeared inside Luke's guard, bringing his katana up in a backwards grip, aiming to cut him cleanly from left to right. Luke's eyes widened and he jumped away from Naruto, landing a few feet away. He slid back into his stance and waited for Naruto's next move. Naruto obliged by charging Luke, appearing to be preparing an overhead strike. Luke immediately brought up his blade to block it. Naruto smirked and showed his strike was a feint when his attack suddenly changed course to a path where it would cleave Luke's head off. Luke's eyes widened, realizing he had no time to block, and flinched when Naruto's blade stopped inches from his throat. "Well, it appears I have won," Naruto said while keeping his eyes on Luke and his sword at his throat. Luke nodded, showing he conceded, and Naruto removed his blade. Everyone else was amazed at the outcome of the fight and began whispering to each other. "Wow Naruto, you're really good with that style of yours, and you understood one of the main rules of combat. Never let your guard down till your opponent concedes defeat, good job," Luke said, grinning. "Thanks, I've trained hard to reach this level," Naruto said, also grinning. "Well, like I said, you can practice on your style here at this time every day from now on," Luke said, getting a nod from Naruto, who moved to a corner of the arena and began practicing some moves he was trying to perfect. "All right everyone, get into pairs. I'll pair up with Percy since this is his first time," Luke said, causing everyone to break up into pairs. "All right, start practicing," he called as he turned to Percy. For the rest of the time they all practiced their fighting skills in pairs, with Luke teaching Percy many different moves he could use with a sword. The next day Naruto decided to get to know Clarice and Selena better, seeing as they were some of the first people he had met after coming here. He found them hanging around outside the camp store drinking sodas. "Hey Clarice, Selena, what's up?" Naruto said, walking up to them. "Oh, hey Naruto," Selena said, and Clarice nodded to him with a grunt. "What brings you here? Not trying to keep me from beating up Prissy, are you?" Clarice asked, causing Naruto to laugh. "That's a good one, Clarice. But no, I'm not. He needs to learn to either think before he speaks or just keep his mouth shut," Naruto said, getting a smirk from Clarice. "Then why are you over here, Naruto?" Selena asked after a moment of silence. "Well, I thought I would get to know you two better, seeing as you girls were one of the first few people I meet, and you showed me around and all." Naruto said, getting a nod from Clarice and a blushing nod from Selena. Well then sit down, I don't have a problem getting to know you better Naruto, you're actually pretty cool. Clarice said, gesturing to the seat across from them. Yeah, go ahead Naruto. Selena said after her blush died down. Naruto nodded and sat down before smirking at Clarice. Yeah, you don't have a problem with me, it's Percy, right, and his bathroom incident. Naruto said, causing Clarice to growl and Selena to break out giggling. Yeah, I hate that brat for that, and I'm going to get him back. Clarice said angrily. Well, go ahead, like I said before, he needs to learn. Just don't hurt him too much, okay? Naruto said while grinning. Oh, I won't hurt him too much, just enough to get my point across. Clarice said, snickering, causing Selena to look at her. You really going through with that plan of yours, Clarice? Selena asked her. Yeah, I mean it's not like it will kill him. Clarice said nonchalantly. What plan? Naruto asked her curiously. Oh, Clarice just plans to separate Percy from his team and attack him using her spear she got from her dad, and then probably humiliate him in some way. Selena told him, getting a nod from Clarice. Okay, this spear of yours sounds interesting, what's the deal with it? Naruto asked her. Clarice's eyes actually lit up at his question. It's a magical spear my dad gave me a few years back that electrocutes my opponents if I touch or stab them with the blade, and I can control how much it electrocutes them. Clarice said in a happy tone. Wow, that sounds really cool, you must really love that spear. Naruto said, getting a happy nod from Clarice and a giggle from Selena. Oh, she does. She polishes and sharpens it every day, even when she doesn't use it. Selena said. After that they sat in a comfortable silence, drinking their drinks and watching the rest of the camp scurry around doing whatever. So, how did you two meet and become friends? Naruto asked, causing them to look at him and smile in remembrance. It's actually a pretty funny story. Clarice said, getting a huff of annoyance from Selena. Yeah, for you. Selena said, causing Clarice to laugh. Anyway, as I was saying, we both came to camp around the same time, and were claimed by our parents rather quickly, Clarice said. Yeah, but after I was claimed, I started getting picked on by some of the girls and hit on by some of the boys. Selena said, disdainfully, showing Naruto that she hated that time. Well, one day I was walking around camp and I heard a noise, so I went to investigate it. I found Selena on the ground surrounded by girls that had been hitting her and calling her names, and jumped in to help her. Clarice continued. Yeah, she came out of nowhere like a charging rhino and took out half the group in one go, and that scared off the rest. Selena said. After they were gone, I had helped her up and made sure she was okay. Then I offered to help teach her how to defend herself, and actually fight in battle. Clarice said. I agreed to her help, and we have been friends ever since. Selena said, smiling, causing Clarice to smile as well. Wow, that is a pretty epic way to start a friendship. Naruto said, causing them to burst out laughing. For the rest of that day Naruto hung out with Clarice and Selena, getting to know them better, and by the time Friday came they were all three happy to say they were good friends. Friday afternoon, Naruto was resting with Percy and Grover at the lake, after Percy had had a near-death experience on the climbing wall. Percy had almost been burned by the lava, his shirt was still smoking from where it had burnt holes in it. And his arms had no hair left. They sat on the pier, watching the naiads weave baskets underwater. How did your conversation go with Mr. D? Percy asked Grover. Fine, just great. Grover said, his face turning a sickly white. So you can still do your career you chose? Naruto asked him. Chiron told you I wanted a searcher's license? Grover asked, looking at them nervously. Well, no, Percy said. He just told us you had big plans for the future, and that you needed credit for completing a keeper's assignment. So did you get it? Grover looked down at the naiads. Mr. D suspended judgment. He said I hadn't failed or succeeded with you yet, so our fates were still tied together. If you got a quest and I went along to protect you, and we both came back alive, then maybe he'd consider the job complete. Well, that's not so bad, right? Percy asked, his spirits lifted. Blah ha ha. He might as well have transferred me to stable cleaning duties. The chances of you getting a quest, and even if you did, why would you want me along? Of course I'd want you along, Percy said. Grover stared glumly into the water. Basket weaving must be nice to have a useful skill. Percy tried to reassure Grover, but it just made him sadder. Stop the pity party, Grover. If you want to succeed you have to believe you can, because in the end people's opinions don't matter. They will eventually see you the way you see yourself. Naruto said, lifting Grover's spirits, and causing him to smile a little. After that they talked for a while about different things. Eventually Percy asked Grover about the 4 empty cabins. Number 8, the silver one, belongs to Artemis, Grover said. She vowed to remain a virgin forever, so of course no kids. The cabin is, you know, honorary. If she didn't have one, she would be mad. Yeah, okay, but what about the other 3, the ones at the end? Are they the big 3? Percy asked. No, one of them, number 2, is Hera's. Grover said tense. That's another honorary thing. She's the goddess of marriage, so of course she wouldn't go around having affairs with mortals. That's her husband's job. When we say the big 3, we mean the 3 powerful brothers, the sons of Kronos. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Naruto said, listing their names. Grover nodded. Right, you know. After the great battle with the Titans, they took over the world from their dad and drew lots to decide who got what. Zeus got the sky, Naruto said. Poseidon got the sea, and Hades got the underworld. Yep, correct, Grover said. But Hades doesn't have a cabin here? Percy asked. No, he doesn't have a throne on Olympus either. He sort of does his own thing down in the underworld. If he did have a cabin here. Grover shuddered. Well, it wouldn't be pleasant. Let's leave it at that. But Zeus and Poseidon, they both had, like billions of kids in the myths. Why are their cabins empty? Percy asked. Well, about 60 years ago, after World War II, the big 3 agreed they wouldn't sire any more heroes. Their children were just too powerful. They were affecting the course of human events too much, causing too much carnage. World War II, you know, that was basically a fight between Zeus and Poseidon's kids on one side, and Hades' kids on the other. The winning side, Zeus and Poseidon, made Hades swear an oath by them. No more affairs with mortal women. They all swore on the river Styx. Naruto said. How did you know that? Grover asked Naruto, surprised. Hello, raised in orphanage by a demigod, that is protected from monsters. Naruto said in a deadpan tone, earning a look of understanding from Grover. That's the most serious oath you can make. Percy said. Grover nodded. And the brothers kept their word, no kids? He asked. Grover's face darkened. 17 years ago, Zeus fell off the wagon. There was this TV starlet with a big fluffy 80s hairdo, he just couldn't help himself. When their child was born, a little girl named Thalia. Well, the river Styx is serious about oaths, mad on it. Zeus himself got off easy because he's immortal, but he brought a terrible fate on his daughter. But that isn't fair. It wasn't the little girl's fault. Percy said. Grover hesitated. Percy, children of the big 3 have powers greater than other half-bloods. They have a strong aura, a scent that attracts monsters. When Hades found out about the girl, he wasn't too happy about Zeus breaking his oath. Hades let the worst monsters out of Tartarus to torment Thalia. A satyr was assigned to her when she was 12, but there was nothing he could do. He tried to escort her here with a couple of half-bloods she'd befriended. They almost made it. They got all the way to the top of that hill. He pointed to the top of the hill across the valley, to the one where they fought the Minotaur. All 3 kindly ones were after them, and a horde of hellhounds. They were about to be overrun when Thalia told her satyr to take the other 2 to safety while she held off the monsters. She was wounded and tired, and she didn't want to live like a hunted animal. The satyr didn't want to leave her, but he couldn't change her mind, and he had to protect the others. So Thalia made her final stand alone, at the top of that hill. As she died, Zeus took pity on her. He turned her into that pine tree. Her spirit still helps protects the borders of the valley. That's why the hill is called Half-Blood Hill. Naruto watched Percy stare at the tree in the distance, deep in thought, and narrowed his eyes at what he thought Percy might be thinking, especially when he saw a sad glint in his eyes. Percy, you can't change what has already happened. Only strive to make sure it never happens again in the future. Naruto told him as he placed his hand on his shoulder. He received a nod in understanding from Percy and Grover, who also took the words to heart as well. Grover, have heroes really gone on quests to the underworld? Percy asked, turning to them. Sometimes, Grover said. Orpheus, Hercules, Houdini. And have they ever returned someone from the dead? He asked. No, never. Orpheus came close. Percy, you're not seriously thinking, Grover began. No, Percy said. I was just wondering. So, a satyr is always assigned to guard a demigod? Grover studied him warily, and Naruto narrowed his eyes at him. already knowing Percy was planning something to do with his mother. Not always. We go undercover to a lot of schools. We try to sniff out the half-bloods who have the makings of great heroes. If we find one with a very strong aura, like a child of the big three, we alert Chiron. He tries to keep an eye on them, since they could cause really huge problems. Grover said, "And you found me and Naruto." Chiron said you thought we might be something special. Percy said. Grover looked as if he had been led into a trap. I didn't. Oh, listen, don't think like that. If either one of you were, you know you'd never ever be allowed a quest, and if you don't, Percy, I'd never get my license. You're probably both children of Hermes. Or maybe even one of the minor gods or goddesses, like Nemesis, the god of revenge. Or Hecate, the goddess of magic. Don't worry, okay? Naruto could tell that he was trying to reassure himself more than him or Percy. That night after dinner, there was a lot more excitement than usual. At last, it was time for Capture the Flag. When the plates were cleared away, the conch horn sounded and we all stood at our tables. Campers yelled and cheered as Annabeth and two of her siblings ran into the pavilion carrying a silk banner. It was about 10 feet long, glistening gray, with a picture of a barn owl above an olive tree. From the opposite side of the pavilion, Clarice and her siblings ran in with another banner, of identical size, but blood red, with a picture of a bloody spear and boar's head. Naruto and Percy turned to Luke. So those are the flags? Naruto asked him. Yeah, Luke said. Do Ares and Athena always lead teams? Percy asked. Not always, he said. But often. So if another cabin captures one, what do you do? Repaint the flag? Percy asked. Luke grinned. You'll see, but first we have to get one. Whose side are we on? Naruto asked, but he had an idea of which one based off of what Annabeth said earlier in the week. Luke gave Percy a sly look, and Naruto knew right then whose team they were on, and had an inkling of the plan they had. We've made a temporary alliance with Athena. Tonight, we get the flag from Ares. And you, Percy, are going to help. Luke said. The teams were announced. Athena had made an alliance with Apollo and Hermes, the two biggest cabins. Apparently, privileges had been traded: shower times, chore schedules, the best slots for activities in order to win support. Ares had allied themselves with everybody else: Dionysus, Demeter, Aphrodite, and Hephaestus. From what Naruto could tell, the Dionysus kids were actually good athletes, but there were only 2 of them. Demeter's kids had the edge with nature skills and outdoor stuff, but they weren't very aggressive. Aphrodite's sons and daughters Naruto wasn't too worried about except for Selena. They mostly sat out every activity and checked their reflections in any reflective surface and did their hair and gossiped. Hephaestus's kids could be a problem, but there were only 4 of them. That of course left Ares' cabin. A dozen of the biggest, meanest, kids on Long Island. Chiron hammered his hoof on the marble floor. Heroes, he announced. You know the rules. The creek is the boundary line, the entire forest is fair game. All magical items are allowed. The banner must be prominently displayed and have no more than 2 guards. Prisoners may be disarmed but may not be bound. No killing or maiming is allowed. I will serve as referee and battlefield medic. Arm yourselves. He spread his hands, and the tables were suddenly covered with equipment. Helmets, bronze swords, spears, oxhide shields coated in metal. Naruto grabbed some leather armor but no helmet. Instead he put a blue armband around his upper arm, and he watched as Percy freaked out a little for a few seconds. Heroes, before you move out, we have a new piece of equipment made by the Hephaestus cabin, that was thought up by our new camper Naruto. Chiron said, then held up a shiny bronze low-frequency 2-way radio. As you can see, this is a low-frequency 2-way radio with the casing made out of celestial bronze. The idea is that the bronze will stop the hardware from giving away a demigod's location to monsters out in the field. Chiron said, and everyone, especially the Athena campers, looked at Naruto in shock, imagining the advantages they would gain if it worked. There are enough here for all the campers to have, with the 2 team leaders having one that can change to other frequencies to give orders to their team. Tonight will be a test run on them, with myself and the monsters stalked in the woods as our indicators of whether they work or not. Chiron said, allowing it to sink in for a second, before giving out the radio earpieces to the campers. Tomorrow morning all campers will hand in a report on how well they think the radios worked, and whether they were attacked by more monsters than usual during the game. I myself will also hand in a report on whether I could sense you better during the game or not. All these reports will be handed into Naruto so that he can go over them and make the necessary changes to them with the help of the Hephaestus cabin members. Chiron said, finishing up. Now get to your positions, the game will begin soon. Chiron said. Blue team forward. Annabeth yelled. Everyone cheered and banged their swords on their shields as they moved forward to their side of the creek. Naruto noticed Percy and Annabeth talking, and approached Annabeth after she had moved away from Percy. This plan of yours wouldn't happen to be a diversion with Percy as bait, would it? Naruto asked her innocently. Annabeth looked nervous for a second. How did you figure that out? She asked. Oh, don't worry. I won't interfere with your plan, Annabeth. I was just making sure so I know where to be to make sure Clarice doesn't maim him to bad. Naruto said, causing Annabeth to relax a little. Oh okay. Well, we put him on border patrol off to the side over there. I had Luke show him where to be. Annabeth said, pointing off to the far side of the creek. Naruto noted that it was far enough away to keep Clarice from interfering if she realized it was a trick. Naruto nodded to Annabeth and headed off in that direction to find a good place to keep an eye on Percy from, and snipe off people with his bow and arrow, if Clarice took it too far. Naruto had just found a spot in a tree that was concealed enough to keep him hidden, and gave him a perfect view of the small clearing by the creek that Percy was in when he heard the conch horn blow. Suddenly there was a flurry of activity and Naruto saw a blue team camper shoot past Percy and across the creek into enemy territory. Naruto narrowed his eyes when he saw Percy tense up and look around him. He scanned the area of woods around Percy, but couldn't see anything and so relaxed. Clarice and her friends suddenly burst through the clearing. Cream the punk! Clarice shouted. As they began attacking Percy, Naruto again checked the woods around the clearing and saw Selena a few feet in, being a lookout for Clarice. Soon Naruto saw Clarice's spear get broken by Percy, and saw her suddenly charge him with her friends. Naruto acted then and fired off just enough arrows to pin her 5 friends to the trees behind them. He then watched them fight, but noticed at the same time Clarice did Luke crossing the creek with the red team's flag. Naruto then jumped out of the tree and reached the clearing just in time to hear the end of her rant and see Annabeth materialize next to Percy and them begin talking. Naruto walked over to Clarice, who was fuming and ranting. Relax, Clarice. He told her. Relax, relax. How am I supposed to relax when that worm broke my spear and ruined my reputation? She fumed at him. Well, I can fix your spirits as easy as fixing an arrow. As for your reputation, you just have to build it back up, so relax. Naruto said to her, causing her to look at him. Okay, I'm calm. So you can fix my spear? Clarice said, calming down. Of course I can. Naruto said, taking the spear from her and putting it on her back. Okay, but if you... She began before a howl ripped through the forest. The campers' cheering died instantly. Stand ready. My bow. Chiron shouted in ancient Greek. Naruto drew his own bow and knocked an arrow. There on a rock right above Percy and Annabeth's head, was a black hound the size of a rhino. Naruto recognized it was a hellhound. It was staring straight at Percy. Nobody moved except Annabeth, who yelled, Percy, run. Right as the hellhound jumped from the rock, a giant orange blur the same size as the hellhound crashed into it, knocking it onto its side several feet away with 4 gashes running down its side. Naruto recognized the blur as Kurama. Everyone watched as the fox then pounced onto the hound, sinking its fangs into its neck and twisting, causing its neck to snap. As it burst into golden dust, Kurama changed back to his regular size and jumped onto Naruto's shoulder. Good job, Kurama, you'll get a reward tonight for that. Naruto said, getting a happy yip from the fox. Immortales. Annabeth said. That's a hellhound from the fields of punishment. They're not supposed to. Somebody summoned it, Chiron said. Somebody inside the camp. Naruto immediately zoned everyone out. He was trying to figure out who could have done it. He even missed Luke walking up, and Clarice shout blaming it on Percy. Naruto then heard a gasp and looked towards Percy and saw a glowing trident above his head. He got a grim look on his face as he and everyone else bowed. It is determined, Chiron announced. My father? He heard Percy ask, completely bewildered. Poseidon, Chiron said. Earthshaker, Stormbringer, father of horses. Hail Perseus Jackson, son of the sea god. Hail Perseus Jackson. Everyone toned before standing up. Naruto looked at Percy to see he was still completely confused. Then suddenly Naruto was enveloped in a silver glow the same color and brilliance as what surrounded cabin 8 at night. Then fire suddenly swirled around Naruto's feet, dancing around him in flickers. Then a symbol of an owl holding an olive branch appeared above Naruto's head. Everyone gasped, and Naruto saw Annabeth's eyes widen. "It is determined," Chiron announced, but nobody bowed this time, they were too amazed. "Athena," Chiron said, "goddess of wisdom and battle." He then went on. "Hestia," he said, "goddess of the hearth, fire, and family." He said one more. "Artemis," he said, "goddess of archery, the moon, wilderness, virginity, and the hunt." "Hail Naruto Namikaze, son of the 3 virgin goddesses." Everyone got over their shock and quickly bowed, intoning, "Hail Naruto Namikaze." They then all stood and started whispering amongst themselves. "Quit," Chiron shouted. "Discussion of these claimings will have to wait till tomorrow, every to bed." "Annabeth, could you show Percy to cabin 3? He asked her. She nodded and told Percy to follow her. Chiron then turned to Naruto, but before he could say anything they heard a noise out towards the cabins. Everyone looked to see that a cabin had appeared in the center of the cabins with an overhang hanging over the central hearth of the camp. Naruto noticed that the base of the cabin was designed to look like a hearth. The walls were a charcoal gray with magical flickering flame designs. The roof was white with gray and black swirls in it that Naruto realized symbolized smoke. On the marble columns holding up the hearth overhang were 2 sconces, one on each side, that had actual Greek fire burning in them. Above the door of the cabin was Hestia's name instead of a number. "Well, I was going to say you had the choice of 2 cabins, Naruto, but it appears one of your mothers wanted you to have a third choice," Chiron said, turning to him. "Well, sir, I believe I will use Hestia's cabin as my main cabin, with me staying in cabin 8 and 6 every now and then, so I can get to know my siblings in cabin 6. I also promise not to use cabin 8 whenever the hunters come around. But I would also like to have a look at cabin 8 and 6 before I turn in for the night," Naruto said, getting a nod from Chiron. "Very well then, I know you can find your way around without help, so I will leave you to explore your cabins," Chiron said before walking off back to the big house. Naruto immediately headed off towards cabin 8. He wanted to get the empty one of the 2 cabins he was visiting over with first. As he got closer to the cabin, Naruto started to feel the same pull again that he felt when they were going to the dining pavilion that second night. When he reached the cabin, Naruto first admired the outside of it. The walls were a light silver color with designs of many forests, mountains, and animals decorating them. The roof was an inky black color with twinkling silver star designs in the shape of constellations all over it. When he went inside the cabin, he saw numerous beds lining both walls with names on the headboards that he assumed were the names of the current hunters. At the far wall he saw a door with his name embroidered on it in sleek silver script. It looked like it had just been added recently. He smiled at the thought that his mother Artemis would add him his own room to the cabin for when he stayed there. He immediately moved towards the door and opened it to see what his room looked like. The first thing he noticed in his room was a queen-size bed with silver-colored silk sheets. Then he noticed a dresser big enough for his clothes and anything else he might have wanted to put into it. Then he noticed on the other wall a display case with a note inside. He also noticed his horn from the Minotaur inside it, and saw that it had been turned into a hunter's horn with silver animal designs on it and a string to sling it over his shoulder with. Naruto walked over to the case and opened it, grabbing the note and the horn. He then opened the note and began reading it. "To my dearest Naruto, I know what a shock it must be for you to find out you the son of the 3 virgin goddesses, but I want you to know without a doubt that we all love you. This room is for you if you decide to use it, as you have more of a right to use it than even my hunters do. The display case is for your spoils of war, all except for the horn you're probably holding right now. I want you to keep that horn close and take it with you if you ever go on any quests. Just blow into the horn if you ever find yourself in trouble and help will come. I love you, my son. Your loving mother, Artemis." When Naruto finished reading the letter, he had a small genuine smile on his face. "Thank you, mother, for this room and for letting me know you love me. I promise to make you and my other moms proud." Naruto prayed to his mother with his head bowed. He then slid the note into his pants pocket and slung the horn over his shoulder. He took one last look around his room, then left it in the cabin, heading over to cabin 6, where he saw Annabeth waiting on the steps. "Why didn't I see that you could be one of my brothers before?" Annabeth asked him when he reached her, then gave him a hug. There's just too much of a difference in me to be immediately spotted. Annabeth. I mean, I have 2 other goddesses for mothers as well," he said, returning the hug. "Well then, better late than never. Welcome to cabin 6, brother," Annabeth said with a warm smile on her face as she led him inside. "Good to be here, sister," Naruto said as he followed her inside. He immediately noticed a difference in this cabin compared to cabin 8. For one, there were about a dozen kids using the cabin. Another thing he noticed was that there wasn't any one color prominently represented for Athena's cabin. But there were many carvings of owls on the walls and even a small statue of Athena. There was even a small room that was a library full of books written in ancient Greek. After he was done looking around, he turned back to Annabeth. "Everyone, this is Naruto, our new half-brother," Annabeth stated. Everyone waved, then introduced themselves. "So Naruto, besides your one gray eye, what other features do you think you got from our mom?" Malcolm, a boy around his age and second in command of the Athena cabin, asked. "Well, I do have a photographic memory, and I'm good at figuring out people's skills and how to work those skills together into a team," Naruto said, earning a nod from Malcolm and Annabeth. "That sounds like traits from mom, all right," Malcolm said. After that, Naruto spent a little while longer getting to know his siblings better before giving Annabeth a hug and leaving to go to Hestia's cabin. As he was leaving, he prayed to Athena. "Thank you, Mom. I love all my siblings." When he approached Hestia's cabin, he noticed a gentle warmth coming from it and smiled. He then went inside to see a central hearth inside the cabin as well as the one outside it. He noticed there were a dozen beds here as well. But he saw another door at the back of this cabin as well that had his name on it in flame script. He smiled and opened the door to see another queen-sized bed, but this one had burnt orange silk sheets. There was a dresser here as well. But in the place of a display case on the other wall was a mirror. He noticed that a box with a bow tied to it was on the bed with a note on top. He took the note and read it. "To my wonderful son Naruto. I had a feeling you wouldn't be able to choose a cabin out of Artemis and Athena's, so I made this one for you. I know what Artemis's letter said, and it goes double for me and Athena. The box is a present from all of us. We knew you would have pyrokinesis for me, so we made you some fire-resistant clothes. And don't worry, your hat and necklace are fire-resistant as well. I hope you love them. Your loving mom, Hestia. Peace. Your closet has other versions of this outfit for you." Naruto smiled another genuine smile and prayed. "Thank you, Mom. I know I will love the cloths no matter what because it came from you 3. I love all 3 of you." He then opened the box and pulled out the cloths. There was a pair of camouflage pants, combat boots, a loose black shirt with his design on the front, and a camouflage trench coat. Naruto smiled at the outfit and folded it, laying it on his dresser to wear the next day. They slid into bed and went to sleep feeling content knowing he is loved by his mothers. Mount Olympus. At the beginning of the Capture the Flag game, in Artemis's temple on Mount Olympus, Hestia, Athena, and Artemis could be seen surrounded by Artemis's hunters watching a magical viewing screen. "My lady, why are we watching that camp?" one of Artemis's hunters asked. "You will see Zoe, just wait," Artemis said to her, and Zoe could see a glint of happiness in her lady's eye. "Are you sure now will be the right time to do it?" Hestia asked the other 2 goddesses, being mindful of the hunters and not saying exactly what she was asking about. "Yes, now is a perfect time, Hestia. We will wait till the end of the game to do it though," Athena said, her voice low enough that the hunters couldn't hear her even with their keener hearing. They then saw the campers getting ready to begin the game, and heard Chiron mention Naruto's invention and the test phase for it. Every one of the hunters and the goddesses were shocked at the invention, some thinking it wouldn't work. While Athena could be heard mumbling to herself about how she couldn't believe she didn't think of it. Then she started smiling along with the other 2 goddesses when they remembered it was Naruto who came up with it. They then watched the game with the focus on Naruto. The hunters were curious why it was focusing on this boy. None of them recognized him as being there before. The goddesses smiled as they watched him basically help 2 of his friends at the same time. While the hunters were confused why he wasn't helping his teammate until it was explained to them. Then they looked at the boy in a new light. Then they saw him shoot 5 arrows in a matter of seconds to pin the 5 other people in the clearing when it looked like the boy's teammate was going to get pummeled by them. The hunters were shocked at the boy's accuracy and speed with a bow. He was even better than some of them. Artemis just smiled in pride at his abilities with her favored weapon. When the game ended and they saw him walk up to the girl they recognized as Clarice and offer to fix her spear, it was Hestia's turn to smile proudly. The hunters were even impressed a little with him. To offer to help a person who was just your enemy a moment ago was a very noble thing to do. Then they watched the hellhound attack and saw how calm he had been through the event. They were all shocked when Percy had been claimed by Poseidon. Well, it seems that Hades is now the only one to not have broke his oath, Hestia said. And he didn't even want to take the oath in the first place. Athena said, I respect him for sticking to it even though he didn't want to. Artemis said with the hunters nodding along with her. Then the three goddesses nodded and stuck their hands together, causing a light to shoot into the viewing screen and encompass the boy they had been watching the entire game. The hunters all gasped as they realized what this meant, and knew that this is why they had been watching. They all heard Chiron state his claiming and name Naruto Namikaze and were confused when he said he was the child of all three goddesses. They then heard the boy state where he was going to be sleeping after Hestia's cabin had appeared. They were glad when they heard he would respect the hunters and not stay in cabin 6 when they were at the camp. Then the viewing screen vanished and the hunters turned to the goddesses. My lady, please explain to us what just happened, Zoe asked. Artemis nodded and began explaining everything pertaining to Naruto's birth to them, with Hestia and Athena helping to clarify some points. She explained how they met his father, how they found him again many years later fatally wounded, how they granted his last wish for a family after his death in the form of Naruto. Then how they left him at the new demigod orphanage to be raised. After the explanation, the hunters all had looks of understanding on their faces. We understand why he was born, no my lady. But don't expect us to like him right away. We will remain neutral to him until he proves himself to us to be one of the few good men in the world, Zoe stated, getting nods of agreement from the other hunters. Artemis had a relieved look on her face at Zoe's statement and said, That's all I ask of from you girls, is to give him a chance. The hunters all nodded to her, then were dismissed to their rooms. Well, that went better than expected, Artemis said as she reopened the viewing portal to see Naruto outside her cabin. Yes, it did. And it seems Naruto is going to view your cabin first, Athena said, causing a smile to appear on Artemis's face. They watched him cheek out the cabin, and saw the small smile Naruto had appear on his face. They then smiled gently at him as they heard his prayer to Artemis. You already have, Hestia whispered out loud, getting agreeing nods from the other two goddesses. Athena then grinned as she saw him approaching her cabin. They all smiled as they watched him interact with his siblings from Athena. When they heard what he had gained from Athena, the other two smiled knowingly as she smiled proudly. They then smiled gently again as they heard his prayer to Athena. I'm sure they already love you, to Naruto, Athena whispered, this time also getting agreeing nods from the other two. They then saw Naruto head to Hestia's cabin and said Goddess smiled at the fact he was staying in her cabin. They watched as he looked around the cabin, familiarizing himself with it. Then they saw him walk to the room meant for him, and they all laughed at the familiarity it had to the room Artemis had made for him in her cabin. They watched as he found the gift they left for him and watched him smile after reading the note. They began smiling when they saw how much he liked the cloths. They began crying a little when they heard his prayer to Hestia. We love you, to our angel of a son, they all said at the same time. They then watched as he fell asleep with a content smile on his face. The next day, Chiron had pulled Naruto aside and handed him the reports on the radios and told him that since he was in a cabin of his own, he could pick which activities he wanted to do. Naruto had told him to leave his mornings clear for meditation as it helped him to enter the state needed for his archery and kenjutsu. Chiron had just nodded and asked him what he wanted to be put in for the afternoon classes. Naruto had picked archery with the Apollo campers, the obstacle course with the Aphrodite and Ares campers, and had chosen an empty time frame in the arena for his kenjutsu. He had left the rest of the time for practicing the powers he had from his moms, whatever they were. Naruto, I was wondering if you would consent to teach some of the willing campers your kenjutsu style? Chiron had asked him after marking down his times. I still have a few more things to learn myself before I am a master of my style. So not this summer, maybe next summer, Naruto had told him. I understand, Chiron said with a nod. You want to make sure you're experienced enough before you teach anybody, he added, getting a nod from Naruto. For the rest of that morning, Naruto hung out with Selena and Clarice. He even returned Clarice's spear to her after fixing it before Chiron had come to talk to him. Here you go, Clarice, I fixed your spear for you, Naruto told her when he had walked up to them and gave her the spear. Thanks Naruto, it looks almost brand new. Clarice had said, then grinned ear to ear and glomped him when he showed her the spear looked almost brand new. Clarice had realized what she did and pulled away with a blush on her face, causing Selena to giggle like crazy. Shut up, it wasn't that funny. Clarice growled out. Whatever you say, Clarice, Selena said while still giggling. He had also got Selena and Clarice to start teaching him French after learning that both of them knew it, with Clarice having learned it from Selena. After that he had spent his morning just talking to them and going over the reports with a grin on his face. It seemed the radios had worked perfectly with no excess monster attacks. Even Chiron's report stated he hadn't been able to pinpoint the campers any better than usual during the game, so he marked them down as a success. Before Naruto had went to do his activities for the afternoon after lunch, he had pulled Charles aside and told him to follow him. He had then walked up to Mr. D's table where he was with Chiron. Chiron, Mr. D, I have come to report on the radios we test ran last night, Naruto had said when he arrived at the table with Charles. Charles had perked up at hearing this and paid attention to what Naruto said. Well, one of our camp celebrities, don't expect me to treat you any differently, boy. Mr. D said, looking up at him. Wouldn't dream of it, Mr. D. If you did treat me any differently I would think the world was ending. Naruto said, causing Mr. D to smirk, getting a shocked look from Charles. Well Naruto, let's hear it, what's the verdict? Do they work well enough to be used outside of camp? Chiron asked, getting an interested look from Charles. Yes, they can. They worked better than I originally ever dreamed they would. There was no broadcasting of the demigods' location whatsoever during the game last night. Naruto said, getting a nod from Chiron and a happy smile from Charles that his cabin had done such a good job with the radio. I already have a few things planned for what we should do first with these, but I want to hear what you think we should do. Chiron said to Naruto. I think that we should have some of the more experienced campers do field tests with them outside of camp before we make them a common thing during quests. Naruto said, with Charles nodding in agreement. Good, I was thinking the same thing. I will have some of the campers go out today with Argus on his supply run and test them then. Chiron said. That sounds like a good idea, sir. That way they won't be too far away from camp if things do turn bad for them. Naruto said, thoughtful. That was my thoughts exactly. Chiron said. You will make a good leader someday, Naruto. Thank you, Chiron, Naruto said. After that, Naruto had spent the rest of the afternoon doing his activities. He spent archery class practicing and joking around with the Apollo campers. During the obstacle course he spent more time with Clarice and Selena. But his fun ended when his kenjutsu time started and he got serious and practiced the maneuvers he already knew before starting on one of the last three he needed to learn to become a master of his father's style. After that he practiced some of the powers he knew he had from his mom Hestia. Like summoning home-cooked meals, projecting memories to others that pertained to family, using his fire abilities for healing, summoning and manipulating fire at different intensities, even Greek fire, and turning the area into a sacred place to his mom so he can claim sanctuary. For the memory projection he used his friends so they could tell him if it was working. He even worked on the powers he got from his mom Artemis. Like enchanting his arrows, communicating with hunting animals like wolves and hunting birds, tracking skills, and traveling through the wild at great speeds. His mother Athena's abilities were more like enhancements for abilities and so didn't need to be worked on. After dinner that night Chiron had pulled him away to let him know how the field test outside of camp went. It was a complete success. After they got into town the group I sent split up into pairs of two and used the radios to keep in contact with each other. One of the pairs had actually found a group of monsters and coordinated a pincer attack with the group and the monsters were eradicated without even knowing what killed them. Chiron told him, "That's good. That means we can use them in the field on quests." Naruto said, receiving a nod from Chiron. "Yes, but we should still be cautious. There are some monsters out there that can pick up low-frequency signals." Chiron warned. "Of course, just tell anyone going on a quest that if they encounter that type of monster to turn off the radios and resort to the hand signals we have been taught here at camp." Naruto said. "That would work. Good job, Naruto," Chiron said before letting him leave to his cabin. After that Naruto returned to Hestia's cabin and went to sleep. The next few days went the same for Naruto, with the only difference being that every other morning he would meditate instead of hanging out with Clarice and Selena, and on some mornings he would hang out with Annabeth and Percy. During these times he would notice how they were acting, but marked it up to the hatred between Athena and Poseidon. He also noticed how the other campers treated Percy as well, and figured it was because of the hellhound attack more than him being a son of Poseidon. One morning Naruto woke up to it being completely dark and he frowned knowing it was morning. He looked outside to see thunderclouds rolling in across the hills. A storm was brewing, and a big one by the looks of it. Suddenly he heard a knocking sound at his door. "Come in," he called. Grover trotted in, looking worried, with Percy behind him. "Mr. D wants to see you." "Did he say why?" Naruto asked him as he got up and walked to his dresser. "He wouldn't say, just told me to bring you to the big house." Grover said. "Okay, I'll be ready in a moment," Naruto said, already pulling on his boots and lacing them up. A few minutes later he was ready and walked outside to see Grover and Percy waiting, while talking about the weather and how it never rained unless they wanted it to. "Well, come on, we should probably not keep Mr. D waiting," Naruto said, getting a nod from Grover, who started leading them to the big house. Everywhere he looked Naruto could see the campers and other creatures were tense, and kept looking up at the storm rolling in. After a few minutes they reached the front porch of the big house. Naruto saw Mr. D at the pinnacle table in his crazy shirt and with his Diet Coke just like usual. Chiron sat across from him in his fake wheelchair. Naruto saw they were playing against invisible opponents, 2 sets of cards hovering in mid-air. Well, Mr. D said. "Our second newest celebrity." Everyone just stood there. "Come closer," Mr. D said. "And don't expect me to kowtow to you, mortal, just because old Barnacle Beard is your father." A net of lightning flashed across the clouds. Thunder shook the windows of the house. "Blah, blah, blah," Dionysus said. Chiron feigned interest in his cards. Grover cowered by the railing, his hooves clopping back and forth. "Sir," Grover said, "you wanted to see me?" Naruto said, gaining his attention. "Ah yes, you and me have a little venture to make to Olympus. It seems you've garnered father's attention," Dionysus said. He then turned back to Percy and said, "If I had my way, I would cause your molecules to erupt in flames. We'd sweep up the ashes and be done with a lot of trouble. But Chiron seems to feel this would be against my mission at this cursed camp. To keep you brought safe from harm." "Spontaneous combustion is a form of harm, Mr. D," Chiron put in. "Nonsense," Mr. D put in. "Boy wouldn't feel a thing. Nevertheless, I've agreed to restrain myself. I'm thinking of turning you into a dolphin instead, sending you back to your father." "Mr. D minus," Chiron warned. "Oh, all right." Mr. D relented. "There's one more option, but it's deadly foolishness." Mr. D rose, and the invisible playing cards dropped to the table. "Come here, Naruto. We're off to Olympus for the emergency meeting. If the boy is still here when I get back, I'll turn him into an Atlantic bottlenose. Do you understand? And Perseus Jackson, if you're at all smart, you'll see that's a much more sensible choice than what Chiron feels you must do." Naruto walked over beside Mr. D as he picked up a playing card and twisted it. Naruto noticed it had turned into a security pass. "Grab hold, boy. First stop the Empire State Building," Mr. D said, causing Naruto to grab hold of his arm before he snapped his fingers, and they slowly disappeared. They reappeared in a side room of the lobby of the Empire State Building, and Mr. D led the way to an elevator and opened the door with Naruto right behind him. Once the door closed, Mr. D inserted the card from before into a slot and a red button with the number 600 on it appeared. He pressed the button and the elevator began to move. Once they reached the top and the doors opened, Mr. D set off at a fast pace to the throne room, causing Naruto to sprint to catch up with him. Once he had caught up and matched his pace to Mr. D's, he began to look around and marveled at what he saw. He could see temples dedicated to all the gods and goddesses and even a market where immortal beings were selling wares. They soon reached the building that contained the throne room, and Mr. D told him to wait there until the doors opened for him to enter, then disappeared inside. After a few moments the doors opened and Naruto walked inside with his head held high. He only stopped once before reaching the center of the room to bow his head to his mom Hestia, causing some of the gods and goddesses in the room to smile. Zeus just raised an eyebrow at him. He then moved to the center of the room and turned to his right facing his mom Athena and bowed his head, then turned to his left facing his mother Artemis and bowed his head. All 3 goddesses smiled at him. Then he turned to Zeus and dropped to one knee and bowed his head while saying, "Hail Lord Zeus and Lady Hera." causing Hera to quirk an eyebrow in interest of him. Rise Naruto Namikaze. Zeus said, his voice sounding like thunder in the room. Naruto rose to his feet. Do you know why you are here, boy? Zeus asked. No, Lord Zeus. Lord Dionysus only told me that I was summoned here by you. Naruto said in a clear voice. You are here, boy, because you present a problem. You are a child of 3 goddesses who swore to remain virgins. Zeus said. Permission to speak freely, my lord. Naruto asked. Zeus quirked an eyebrow. Permission granted, boy. Zeus said in interest. Sir, while it is true that I am a son of 3 virgins, is it not also true that one of them has been having children through a different process than normal? While I was made from a totally different process than that. I was made by the mixing of the blood of my father and the ichor of my mother's. How am I a problem, sir? Naruto said, then asked. You present good points, boy. But even if that wasn't the problem, you are still 3/4 god. The strongest demigod on the planet at the moment. How do I know you won't turn on Olympus and use your power to attack us? Zeus asked. Sir, give me a test to prove myself loyal to the gods, any test you deem worthy. Naruto said before a chill went through the room. That is an excellent idea, child. I believe I have the perfect test for him, brother. A voice said, causing everyone to turn to a corner of the room to see Hades standing there. What are you doing here, Hades? Zeus said angrily. I am here, brother, to report that my helm has been stolen, also straight from the underworld. Hades said, causing the gods and goddesses to gasp. Really? Poseidon asked in shock. Yes, brother, really. I propose that the boy's test be to find and retrieve it for me. Hades said. Zeus thought for a moment, then nodded his head. Very well, that shall be your test, boy. You may take no more than 2 companions with you. Zeus declared. Naruto bowed his head and said, as you wish, Lord Zeus. Before you go, boy, I want to know why you mentioned me in your hailing of Zeus? Hera asked. Because, Lady Hera, unlike other demigods, I do not hate or fear you. I know that your hatred of us demigods stems from Lord Zeus's many affairs, and I believe that in time, if I can prove myself to you, you will not hate me, showing demigods everywhere that hate and fear can be overcome in any form. Naruto said, bowing his head to her and leaving most of the gods and goddesses including Hera shocked. Very well, boy, you may go outside to wait until Dionysus appears to take you back to camp. Zeus said, receiving a bow from Naruto as he turned to leave the room. Did anyone else notice anything weird while the boy was in the room? Dionysus asked them, gaining a few nods from the other gods. Yes, what do you think it could be? Asked Apollo. It was our bodies trying to decide whether to be in our Greek or Roman forms in his presence. Athena said, shocking the other gods and goddesses. You mean? Aphrodite began. Yes, our son is of both our Greek and Roman forms. Artemis said. But how is that possible? Hermes asked, getting nods in recognition of the question. I can answer that I was the one who did the main part of the ritual we used to create him. Hestia said, causing the others to look at her. Because Naruto was born from the mixing of our ichor and Minado's blood, which has never been done before. He took on aspects of both our forms, as both have the same ichor running through their bodies. Hestia explained, getting looks of understanding from the others. That boy just got way more interesting. Hera comment, getting nods of agreement from the others. After another hour of talking and deciding things, Zeus finally dismissed the council meeting, and Dionysus left to find Naruto, who was waiting outside. Well, come along, boy, it's time to get back to that infernal camp. Dionysus said, turning to walk away. Sir, before we go, I was wondering if I could talk to you for a moment? Naruto asked. Well, what is it, boy? Dionysus asked him impatiently while turning to him. Well, sir, I know your feelings about camp and your punishment, but I was wondering if you had ever thought about your punishment from the other gods' perspective? Naruto asked. What are you on about, boy? Dionysus asked a little angrily. Well, think of it from the other gods and goddesses' perspective. You get to spend all day every day with your children at camp. You get to let them know you love them from the moment you see them. Naruto explained. Yeah, so? Dionysus asked softly while thinking about what he was being told. I bet the other gods and goddesses are envious or even jealous of you at times, wishing they had the same ability to do that for their children. Instead of only being able to claim them when they arrived at camp, and hoping they will see them when the camp visits Olympus at times. Naruto continued, causing Dionysus to go deep into thought. Dionysus then grabbed Naruto's shoulder and flashed them back to camp in front of Chiron. He will explain everything, Chiron. I have some things to think about. Dionysus said distractedly as he left the room in thought. What is up with him? Chiron asked. Oh, I just told him a few things that may change his view on camp. Naruto said, causing Chiron's eyes to widen. I see, Chiron said in thought. So where is Percy and Grover? Naruto asked, looking around. They left on a quest a few minutes ago to the underworld to retrieve Zeus's master bolt. Chiron said after a moment. So that's what Hades meant when he said his helm was also stolen. Naruto said in thought, while Chiron looked at him in shock. I think you best tell me what happened on Olympus. Chiron said, causing Naruto to nod. Naruto then spent the next hour explaining what happened on Olympus. Well, this changes things, Chiron said, shocked. I think it would be best if you went to the attic and consulted the oracle, while I gather the two you wish to take with you. Chiron said, getting a nod from Naruto. Alright, I wish to take Clarice and Selena with me. Naruto said, getting a nod from Chiron, who immediately left the room to retrieve them. Naruto then headed up the stairs to the attic. Once he was in the attic, Naruto looked around and saw many old Greek artifacts, even a Hydra head on a plaque that said, Hydra head number 1, Woodstock, NY, 1996. By the window, sitting on a stool, was what Naruto could only guess was the oracle. It was a non-wrapped mummy of a human female in a sundress. Naruto approached it. Suddenly she sat up and looked straight at him with her empty eye sockets and opened her mouth. A green mist coalesced around her form, coming from her mouth. Naruto shivered a little at it. Inside his head, Naruto heard a female voice say, I am the spirit of Delphi, speaker of the prophecies of Phoebus Apollo, slayer of the mighty Python, approach seeker, and ask. Another chill went up Naruto's spine at hearing the voice, but he gathered his courage and asked. What is my destiny? The mist swirled more thickly, collecting right in front of him. It then coalesced into the forms of some of his friends at camp, sitting around a table eating what looked like lunch. Selena looked up from her food and said in the voice of the oracle, You shall retrieve what was stolen, from the god who has turned. Then Clarice spoke up. Your fate will be decided if it is safely returned. Life if safe and death if not. Then Percy looked up. You shall meet up with friends in the west, and help and receive help in return. Then Annabeth spoke. You will help to save someone close to one of your friends. A reward will be given, choose wisely in the end. Then Grover spoke. Beware of the voice that haunts your friend, it will try to tempt you before the end. Chiron then spoke the last line. You shall be betrayed by one you call friend. The figures then began to dissolve. Naruto felt better once the mist was completely gone, and turned to leave the attic. When he returned to the living room, he saw Chiron, Clarice, and Selena already there. Well, what was your prophecy? Chiron asked when he noticed Naruto, causing the others to turn to him. Naruto told them what the oracle had said. Well, it seems your quest will mimic Percy's to some degree. He too had a line that said something about a god who had turned. It is probably the same god. Chiron said thoughtfully. I wonder who this betrayer could be though? Selena asked. I don't know. Naruto said, shaking his head. I believe Percy didn't tell me his whole prophecy, and that he may have received this line as well. Chiron said. Well, that narrows the number of people down, but that's still too many to single one out. Naruto said. I think that whoever this betrayer is, could have been the same person who summoned the Hell Hound into the camp. Clarice said. I believe you may be right, Clarice. I will keep my eyes open for any suspicious behavior after you leave. Chiron said thoughtfully. That line about saving someone precious to one of my friends could only pertain to Percy's mom, seeing as I received this quest from Hades. Naruto said thoughtfully. I was thinking the same thing. Chiron said, then added. Percy is also the one mentioned in the part about the tempting voice, as he was complaining about dreams that had a voice trying to tempt him before he left. Well, you don't have to worry, I won't let it tempt me, Chiron. I will never turn against my friends. Naruto said, making everyone else smile. I believe that you should start making your way west when you begin your quest, as you will most likely run into the god who has turned when Percy does. Chiron said, getting nods from everyone else as they agreed with him. I believe we should wait till in the morning to start the quest, as it is getting late. Clarice said, causing everyone to notice how dark it had gotten. I agree with Clarice. Selena said, with Naruto nodding in agreement. Very well, tomorrow I would say around 9. We can take you as far as the bus terminal in Manhattan, after that you're on your own. Chiron said. Agreed, we will meet you at the top of Half-Blood Hill at that time. Naruto said for the three of them. Very good, I would suggest you three go pack and get some sleep, you have a very big day tomorrow. Chiron stated as everyone left to their cabins to prepare and get one more night of decent sleep. When Naruto arrived at his cabin, he immediately grabbed his pack and stuffed a few extra pair of clothes inside. He then grabbed a demigod medkit he had and placed it inside as well. After that went his extra bow and quiver of arrows, his extra katana, and a few packages of on-the-go food. He then went to the camp store where he got them to loan him about $100 in mortal cash, a small sack of gold drachmas, and a tent in case they ended up having to sleep outdoors. He saw Clarice and Selena there getting loaned the same things. Once back at his cabin, Naruto placed the tent in his bag and half of the money, placing the other half along with the bag of drachmas into the pocket of the pants he was going to wear the next day. He then made sure he had all the equipment he was going to carry on his person ready to go. This included his hunting horn, his zippo, katana, his red socks hat, his necklace, bow and his boot knife. After making sure everything was ready to go for tomorrow, Naruto finally went to bed. The next day Naruto woke up around 8 in the morning, gathered up his stuff and headed to the dining pavilion. When he reached the pavilion he found both Clarice and Selena already there, both sitting at the Ares table. I see you girls are already up, Naruto said walking up to them. Yeah, we have been here for about 30 minutes no, Clarice said while taking a bite of her food. Go ahead and take a seat and eat, Naruto, Selena said, getting a nod from Naruto, who sat down across from them and began eating. After they were done eating they grabbed their packs and took stock their supplies. Clarice had packed almost the same thing as Naruto but with a few differences. She had her spear and shield packed instead of a bow and katana, and on herself she had a sword strapped across her back. Selena had the same things packed, except she didn't have any weapons in her pack, and she had 2 daggers strapped to her waist and a strap of throwing daggers tied around her upper arm hidden by her shirt. They agreed they had everything needed, and Naruto made sure that Clarice and Selena put half their money in their pockets and had Selena keep her bag of drachmas in her pocket, insisting that if anything happened to their packs they would still be able to provide for themselves that way. After that they headed up to Half-Blood Hill, arriving at the same time as Chiron and Argus. All right, on time, Chiron said when they all stopped at the top of the hill. He then handed each of them one of the low-frequency radios Naruto had invented. Well, we didn't want to keep you guys waiting, we know how busy around here it is for you, helping run the camp and all, Naruto said as they took them put them on, setting them to the same frequency. Well, it won't be the same around here with you three gone along with Percy's group being gone, Chiron said, giving him a hug. Don't worry, we will be back before you know it, Naruto said, pulling out of the hug. He then watched Chiron hug the girls as well. After their hugs the girls followed Argus down to the waiting van. Chiron then turned to Naruto with a confused look on his face. Chiron, if Percy and the others contact you, you can tell them that I'm on a quest, just don't tell them what it is for, okay? Naruto said, getting a confused look from Chiron. Why not, Naruto? Chiron asked. If you do, it might just give Grover and Annabeth the thing they need to have Percy look somewhere else other than the underworld for the bolt. I believe that the underworld has a big part to play in Percy's quest, Naruto said, getting an understanding look from Chiron. Alright Naruto, I will do as you ask. Now be safe and come back as soon as you can, Chiron said, getting a nod from Naruto in understanding as he headed down the hill with Kurama following him to the others in the van. What took you so long? Clarice asked him when he got in the car. I just had to tell Chiron one last thing before we left, Naruto said, getting a nod from her. Hey, look at Chiron, guys, Selena said, causing them to look out the window with her, to see Chiron firing an arrow into the sky in salute of our quest. Well, that's quite a send-off, Naruto said, smirking. Yeah, he usually just raises his bow in salute, Selena told him. He must think we're going to do remarkably well then, Clarice said. The three demigods spent the entire trip into NY watching the scenery and chatting about things they saw and food they wanted to try now that they were outside of camp. In the driver's seat Argus had a smile on his face while listening to their conversation. It was around 3 in the afternoon when they finally reached the Greyhound bus terminal in Manhattan. Once they had parked, Argus handed them their packs from the trunk, and helped them get their tickets, then he drove away heading back to camp. As they waited for their bus to come, Naruto had seen a poster on the ground with Percy's picture on it and the words, "Have you seen this boy?" under it. He had quickly picked it up and threw it away. His anger at Percy's stepfather Gabe was washed away when Kurama yipped at him, telling him to calm down. "You're right, Kurama, me getting angry won't solve anything," Naruto said. "Angry at what?" Naruto heard Selena ask him from the place she and Clarice had been sitting having a girls' conversation. "Oh, just something to do with Percy, it's not important to the quest," Naruto said. "If you're sure, Naruto," Selena said, falling back into conversation with Clarice after Naruto nodded. Naruto had then spent the rest of the time looking up at the huge rain clouds that had been pouring down rain since the day before, wondering when it was going to stop. Finally the bus came into the station and they boarded, with Kurama hiding in Naruto's pack with his nose poking out the top. "Next stop, the Grand Canyon, Arizona," Naruto said dramatically while taking his seat between the girls after putting their bags in the overhang. Selena giggled at his acting while Clarice rolled her eyes. They soon settled in as the bus made its way across the country, stopping in every state they went through. As the miles went by, they spent their time either talking or sleeping, two at a time, with one of them always awake. Soon the bus entered the state of Arizona and they got ready to depart. "Well, this bus ride has been boring," Naruto said while stretching his arms above his head. "You can say that again," Clarice said, yawning as she had just been woken up by Naruto. "We should feel lucky that a monster hasn't attacked yet," Selena said, admonishing them. Sorry, Naruto said sheepishly. "Yeah, it's not like we're wishing for a monster attack, we were just saying it was boring," Clarice said, trying to appease Selena's anger at their statement. "Well, we will be arriving at the stop at the Grand Canyon soon. I'm sure you can find some kind of excitement then," Selena said, conceding defeat at trying to calm them down and stop them from looking for trouble. "Yeah, well, when we get there, we can see the sights for a while before heading out again," Naruto said, causing the girls to grin. "Okay, I've always wanted to visit the Grand Canyon anyway," Selena said. "Cool," Clarice said, just happy to be able to explore the place some. The bus soon arrived at the terminal and they disembarked after grabbing their things and headed towards the restrooms. Once they were out of sight of anyone else, Naruto let Kurama out of his bag, who gave a happy yip at being able to walk around outside again. Once they had all used the restroom and had met back up out front, they headed over to the observation deck at the top of the canyon. They then took turns using one of the binocular stands to look at the view of the canyon from the top. Naruto then looked at the man that was stationed to lead people to the bottom of the canyon, then looked at the time. "We should probably go talk to the man over there now if we're going to go to the bottom of the canyon before it gets any later, so that we can look around for a while and still get back up here before it gets too dark to find our way," Naruto told the girls, who turned to him and nodded. "Okay," Selena said happily. "Sounds good to me, Naruto," Clarice said. They then walked over to the man standing beside the trail. "Would you three like to go to the bottom of the canyon?" the man asked. "Yes sir, we would," Naruto said, getting a nod from the man. He then explained to them which trails were safest to use, and had them pay the fee before letting them go by him. "Well, he was very helpful," Naruto said. "Yeah, he even explained the best trails to use," Selena said, smiling. "He seemed a little too friendly to me," Clarice said. That had sparked a little argument between her and Selena that lasted till they reached the bottom of the canyon. "Girls, stop fighting, we're here to sightsee for a while before continuing the quest, not argue over how helpful someone was," Naruto said, getting them to calm down and say that they were done. They then spent a while looking around the canyon, seeing some of the more famous rock formations in the canyon, and generally having fun. Suddenly Kurama let out a yip, then growled, causing Naruto to stiffen and look around. "What is it, Naruto, what's wrong?" Selena asked him, worried, as Clarice also started looking around trying to spot what had Naruto spooked. Kurama senses a monster nearby, but can't tell exactly where or what it is, Naruto said, causing Selena to go wide-eyed before looking around as well. "All right girls, stay calm and don't move, I'm going to use an ability I got from my mother Artemis to sense where the monster is," Naruto said, receiving nods from the girls. Naruto then bent down on one knee and placed his palm flat on the ground. He closed his eyes and opened his other senses to the power of the wilderness around him. He sensed several normal-sized presences that he knew were people, and one large presence that felt like several monsters in one. His eyes widened at the monster's presence and he cursed, causing the girls to look at him in worry. "What is the monster, Naruto?" Clarice asked him. "It's a chimera," Naruto said, causing her eyes to widen before she began looking around the area more keenly. Selena had gasped when he said what the monster was and had grabbed her daggers from their sheaths. "Where is it at, Naruto?" Selena asked, her voice slightly unsteady. "It's to the west of us, moving this way," Naruto said. "Do you know if it has picked up our scent yet?" Clarice asked. "It has, and we will have to fight it as we won't be able to outrun it, but I know we will be able to beat it," Naruto said, causing them to panic for a moment before calming down at his words. "Alright, here's the plan, Clarice. You will go in and distract the beast with your spear. Kurama will aid you, while I will cover you with my archery," Naruto said, getting a nod from Clarice, who grabbed her spear and shield and got ready. "Selena, while we distract it, you will flank it and try to take out the serpent tail," Naruto continued, getting a nod from her as she mentally prepared herself. "Once Selena is in position and has attacked the serpent tail, I will switch to my katana and attack it while helping whoever is having trouble at that time, okay?" Naruto finished, getting another nod from both girls. "And remember, use the radio to call for my help, so you don't have to call your intentions out loud," he added. Naruto then scaled the small rock formation beside him and got into a position to where he could see the chimera, but it couldn't see him. "Alright, Clarice, I'm going to start firing arrows at it. When I do, I want you and Kurama to sneak up on it as close as you can before attacking it, so you can hopefully get in a few good hits before it can retaliate. Selena, you will also begin to flank it when I start firing," Naruto whispered into his radio. "You got it, Naruto," he heard Clarice whisper back. "Okay," he heard Selena whisper to him. He then drew his bow back, causing an arrow to form ready to fire. Then he focused his fire abilities and used them to form Greek fire around the arrowhead. This was one of his abilities he had discovered he had during his powers training. It was also the only fire he could summon without an open source. He then fired the arrow at the chimera, hitting it in the kneecap, causing it to roar in pain. He then began to fire as many of the same arrow as he could, hitting the chimera in many different places. "Naruto, we're close enough, lower the number of arrows you're firing so we can attack," Naruto heard Clarice whisper to him through the radio. He lowered the number of arrows he was firing, then saw Kurama leap out, shifting to his bigger form in midair, while striking the chimera in the center of its two main heads, causing it to stumble back in shock and pain. He then saw Clarice jump out and stab the beast with her spear in the side, sending arcs of electricity into the beast, causing it to recoil from the spear, before it was stabbed by it again before it could recover. He continued to fire arrows as well, as he watched Clarice and Kurama fall into sync on their attacks, keeping the chimera off balance. "Alright, Naruto, I'm in position and about to attack the serpent tail," he heard Selena whisper through the radio. Then he saw the tail raising from behind, about to attack Clarice, and aimed his bow at it. But before he could fire his shot, he saw Selena drop down from above the tail's head and cleanly sever it from the rest of the chimera. He then returned his bow to his necklace form and grabbed his zippo, turning it into his katana, as he jumped to the floor of the canyon from the formation. "Girls, I'm coming in," Naruto whispered through the radio as he began to charge towards them and the chimera. "Naruto, when you reach us, I want you to strike the left head while I strike the right, and Kurama will strike down the center, okay?" he heard Clarice whisper. "Okay, I can do that," Naruto whispered back. As soon as Naruto was close enough, he jumped up and towards the chimera, bringing his katana down just as Clarice brought her sword up, having switched her spear for it sometime during the fight. And Kurama swiped with his claws down the center between its head, and Selena sliced down with one of her daggers and up with the other. All their attacks hit at the same time, causing its head to be severed and its body to erupt into a shower of golden dust. "Alright, we did it, that was awesome," Clarice said, smiling like crazy. "Yeah, it was, we did a good job," Selena said, also grinning. "We worked really well together," Naruto said, smirking at their grins. They then heard a happy yip and saw Kurama land on Naruto's shoulder in his normal form. Naruto then looked around and saw the three heads of the chimera laying on the ground. "I guess these are our spoils of war," he said, picking up the head he had severed. "Yeah, I bet Dad is going to be proud," Clarice said, picking hers up and bowing her head for a moment before it disappeared. "Wow, my first spoil of war. I hope Mom will be proud when she sees it," Selena said, copying Clarice with hers, causing it to disappear as well. Girls, what did you just do?" Naruto asked them. "Oh, we just prayed to our parents to receive them, and they collected them using their magic," Clarice explained. This is usually done with all spoils of war, as our parents normally like to show off outfits in battle before returning them to us. These will probably be at camp when we return, placed on plaques by our parents. Selena said. Naruto nodded, then bowed his head and prayed. Moms, I want you three to receive this spoil of war one gained from battling the chimera. He then felt a warm glow and opened his eyes to see the head glowing before it vanished. They then collected their stuff and climbed to the top of the canyon before finding the campgrounds and setting up their tents for the night. All three fell asleep instantly when their heads hit their pillows. The next day Naruto woke up and exited his tent and noted that the girls weren't awake yet. So he decided to go get some firewood and food from the camp store, and headed off in the direction indicated by the signs. When he arrived at the store he noticed it was a low concrete building with only 2 windows in the front. As he walked in the door he noticed 3 old ladies behind the counter, the same 3 old ladies from the time with Percy and Grover when they were leaving Yansy, and narrowed his eyes in confusion. "What can we get you, dear?" the old lady on the right asked him as he walked up to the counter. I would like to buy a small pile of firewood and some eggs and bacon," Naruto answered. The old lady on the left then got up and walked over to a fridge behind the counter and grabbed a carton of eggs and a package of bacon, before returning to the counter and bagging it. "Here you go, Sonny. The firewood is outside on the left side of the building," she said while handing him the bag. "Thank you. How much will this cost me?" Naruto asked them. The old lady in the center then rung up the price on the register and after a few seconds looked at the total. "That will be $20, dear," she said, and thanked him when he handed her the money. As Naruto was turning away one of the old ladies grabbed his arm and he turned back to her. "We have information for you, son of the 3, she said when he turned back to them and saw it was the one in the center. "You're the Fates, aren't you?" Naruto asked them, his eyes narrowed. "Yes, dear boy, we are," the one on the left said. "What is this information you have for me?" Naruto asked them. "To reach where you must go, you will need the pearls of Persephone," the one on the right intoned. "One will be found near the blacksmith's forge," the center one intoned next. "The next will be found in a land without rain," the one on the left intoned. "Another will be found in a place stuck in time," the one on the right intoned again. "The final one you will need will be found near the guide who will show you the way." They all intoned together. "Thank you for this information," Naruto said to them. "Nonsense, dear boy. We simply gave you hints of their locations, you must still find them," the one on the left said before they vanished, leaving Naruto standing there. Naruto left the store and gathered the firewood deep in thought. On his way back to the camp he tried to decipher what they had said but could not figure it out. Once he arrived at the tents he decided to just wait for the others to wake up and have them help to discern the locations. He then set to work stacking the firewood into the pit and using his power over fire to set them alight. He pulled out 2 pans from his bag and began to cook breakfast for him and the girls. As the aroma of the food filled the area, Selena and Clarice came out of their tents and looked around. "Good morning, Naruto. I was wondering what that smell was," Selena said as she smiled at him. "I see you decided to cook breakfast. That's good, I'm starving," Clarice said while sitting down near the fire. "Good morning, girls. After breakfast we need to talk, okay?" Naruto said while dishing out the food. The girls nodded and dug into the food. After they were done eating and they had repacked their stuff into their bags, the girls turned to Naruto with curious looks on their faces. "Alright girls, when I went to the camp store to get the food and firewood, I ran into the Fates," Naruto told them, causing the girls to go wide-eyed. "What happened when you ran into them?" Selena asked with a worried look mirrored by Clarice. Naruto then told them about his encounter with the Fates and what they had told him. "It seems the Fates want to help us," Clarice said while sighing in relief. "Yeah, but I have no clue where any of those places are except for maybe one of them," Naruto said thoughtfully. "Well, the blacksmith they're talking about is Hephaestus, and I only know of one forge he used the most, and it is currently found at Mount St. Helens," Selena said, causing the other 2 to look at her. "What? My mom is technically married to him," Selena said, blushing at how they looked at her. "Well, that's one place," Clarice said. "Yeah, and the next is a place without rain. That could be anywhere in the deserts of the US," Naruto said. "Yeah, but it is most likely a place that is special to the gods," Clarice said while thinking about locations that were like that. "Well, there is a place here in Arizona I think that I heard Chiron mention once, he called it the junkyard of the gods," Selena said. Maybe that's the place. She added. It most likely is, so that's 2 down. Clarice said. Alright, the third is a place stuck in time. Either of you know a place like that? Naruto asked them. Well, there was the lotus cult from the old stories, that would trick mortals and demigods into eating their lotuses, then trap them in time so they could do as they wished with them. But I don't know where they would be now. Selena said after remembering the stories about them. I know where they're at now. Father goes there a lot to have fun. They're in Vegas right now, posing as a casino called the Lotus Hotel and Casino. Clarice said, happy that she finally knew one of the locations. Good, that's 3. Naruto said. The last one said something about a guide. What guide would we need? Selena asked. I don't know, I'm just as confused about this one as you, Selena. Clarice admitted. I think I know. Once we have the helm, we will have to go to the underworld to return it to Hades. Karen is the guide to the underworld for the dead. So it has to be somewhere near where he is. Naruto said, causing the other two to look at him in understanding. That actually makes sense, and the pearls are for getting people out of the underworld. Clarice said thoughtfully. Yeah, and the entrance to the underworld is currently located in Los Angeles. So we know where to go for that one now too. Selena said. First stop the junkyard of the gods. Let's get to looking. Naruto said, looking at the girls. Hey Selena, do you know where exactly it is in Arizona? Clarice asked her. I think Chiron said it was located in Gila Claw. Selena said. Alright, Gila Claw is a few counties over, so we will need to catch another bus to there. Naruto said, getting nods from the girls. After they got their tickets, the guy at the desk told them that their bus was about to leave, so they hurried over and hopped on the bus just before the driver closed the doors. That was close. Naruto said, getting nods from the girls as they gave the driver their tickets and took some seats at the back of the bus. Hey Naruto, where is Kurama? Selena asked, causing Clarice to look inside Naruto's bag. Yeah, he isn't in your bag. Clarice said. Oh, he decided to make his own way there. Don't worry, he will get there about the same time we will. He travels faster when he is in the wild. Naruto explained, and the girls nodded their understanding. About an hour later, their bus pulled up to a stop in the middle of nowhere, and the driver called out their stop. They got off the bus with their bags and waved to the driver as he pulled away. They looked around the area and noticed only a few rundown and abandoned buildings, as well as a junkyard beside a post office stop with a crooked sign saying Gila Claw, Arizona above the door. Well, that definitely has to be the place we need to go to. Naruto said, pointing in the direction of the junkyard. Alright, then we need to hurry, I'm getting a weird feel from this place, like there's danger somewhere. Clarice said while scanning the surroundings carefully. There's just one small thing. Selena said, gaining the others' attention. What is it, Selena? Naruto asked her, worried at the tone in her voice. Well, things in that junkyard have been thrown away by the gods for a reason, and it usually means they don't want anyone messing with it when they do. Selena said, her voice sounding more grave as she spoke. Yeah, so, what's the problem? Clarice asked her while Naruto's face paled at the thoughts rushing through his head on what Selena could be getting at. Well, if I'm right, I believe they have protections against someone taking anything that probably will lead to that person's death. Selena said, hinting at where she was heading with her thoughts. And with the pearl in there, we will most likely have to face whatever the protection is once we grab it. Naruto said, his face pale, causing Selena to nod her head that he was correct. So we can deal with whatever it is as a team, okay guys? We handled that chimera well, so we can handle whatever is in there, alright. So we should get going. Clarice said encouragingly before getting nods from them and leading them into the junkyard. They followed a path through the mountains of junk, looking for anything that might help them narrow down the place the pearl might be. But they were hard-pressed to find anything that would help them find it. This is impossible, we'll never find it in this place. Clarice shouted in frustration from near one of the piles. Naruto, couldn't you narrow it down with that ability of yours, since Persephone made them and she is a goddess of spring? Selena asked, causing Naruto to blink in surprise at the question. I'm not sure, I can try, but it might not work. Naruto said, getting nods from the girls. He then dropped to one knee and opened his senses, searching for anything nature-related in the immediate area. At first he didn't sense anything near them, but then he picked up on an object back near the entrance to the junkyard and smiled in success. Yes, I found something back near the entrance. Naruto said excitedly, causing the girls to smile triumphantly. Then let's get going already. Clarice said, ready to get the pearl and get out. They quickly arrived back at the entrance and began looking through the pile Naruto told them the object was located. About an hour later, after having dug through half of the pile, they finally came across an old-looking model of Athena's Parthenon that Naruto said the signature was coming from. Selena reached her hand into the door of the Parthenon model and felt around inside before pulling her hand back out with it wrapped tightly around something. She opened her hand and gave a triumphant shout when it revealed the pearl they were looking for. Both Naruto and Clarice smirked triumphantly, and Naruto took the pearl from Selena and whistled, causing Kurama to come bounding out of nowhere and land on his shoulder. Naruto pulled a drawstring bag from his pocket and put the pearl inside, then tied the bag shut before placing it around Kurama's neck. "I want you to keep this bag safe, Kurama, until we need the pearls, okay boy?" Naruto said after pulling his hands away. "Yes sir, boss." Kurama yipped out before jumping to the ground and waiting on them to lead the way to the next pearl. "Alright girls, that's one pearl down. Let's get out of here before we get attacked by something for taking the pearl," Naruto said before a shriek was heard and they all turned to see a mechanical bird come diving down towards them. They all dived out of the way before scrambling for cover under a tin roof jutting out of the side of one of the piles. "What is that thing?" Naruto asked while making his bow appear in his hands from its necklace form. "I'm not sure, but it looks like some kind of automaton," Selena said while holding two of her throwing knives in her hands. "Damn Hephaestus and his inventions," Clarice said with her spear in her hands as it was her only long-range weapon. "Calm down Clarice, we need to come up with a plan. Do you have any ideas, Naruto?" Selena said before asking while looking towards Naruto. "A few, but they all have a chance of one of us being hurt while acting as bait," Naruto said in a distracted way while trying to come up with a strategy that wouldn't get any of them hurt. "We don't have time for a strategy that won't get us hurt, Naruto." "What's the best one you've got?" Clarice said in a commanding tone, causing Naruto to sigh in defeat before gesturing to them to pay attention. "Alright, here's what I'm thinking. That bird is out there somewhere and I have the best long-ranged weapon at the moment," he said, getting nods from the girls. "Yeah, and what do you need us to do so you can get a shot off at it?" Selena asked him, causing him to smirk at him. "I knew you would catch on, Selena. I need you two to go out there and get its attention somehow," Naruto said, getting nods from the girls. "We can do that, but what will you be doing?" Clarice asked him. "While you two have it distracted, I'm going to be getting to a higher point on this pile so I can have a better line of sight for my shot," Naruto said, then added, "When I get there I'm going to summon the largest amount of Greek fire I can onto the end of my arrow to try and defeat it by melting it." "That sounds like a plan, Naruto, let's get started," Clarice said while hefting her spear and looking at Selena, who nodded. They both ran out into the open, with Selena spotting the bird almost immediately and throwing one of her throwing daggers at it, which clanged off its eye harmlessly but did its job of getting the bird to focus on them. Once Naruto saw they had its attention, he quickly took to climbing the pile behind him while trying to stay quit so the bird wouldn't notice what he was doing. Clarice had just pumped a large jolt of electricity into the bird with her spear after it had tried to take a swipe at Selena with its talons. It dropped to the ground frozen for a few moments before jumping up and charging the two with an ear-piercing shriek. Neither were able to get their weapons up in time to defend and were about to be attacked before Kurama came out of nowhere in his other form and slammed into the bird, causing it to stumble back from the impact. It regained its bearing and the two began to circle each other before charging, with Kurama clawing out the bird's eye and the bird scoring an attack on his side with its talons, leaving 3 long jagged wounds down his side that were bleeding profusely. Kurama whimpered from the attack and dropped to the ground, reverting back to his normal form. The bird shrieked in triumph before charging to deliver a final strike, with the girls looking on in horror. Right as the bird was about to strike, an arrow covered in Greek fire sprouted from its chest, with the fire incinerating the bird in seconds. The girls let out a breath they didn't know they were holding before running to Kurama's side. After seeing how badly he was wounded, Selena began to cry into Clarice's shoulder, who was looking sadly down at the fox. "Watch out girls, let me see him," Naruto shouted as he came running up to them. Both girls backed away as Naruto skidded to a stop on his knees beside the fox. "It's going to be all right, buddy, I'm going to take care of those wounds," Naruto said softly while pulling out his Zippo. He struck his Zippo and coated his hands in the resulting flames. He then closed his eyes, focusing on his powers of healing with fire. The girls watched on amazed as the flames turned a striking blue color. Naruto opened his eyes and placed his hands over Kurama's wounds, causing them to glow a bright white color. Then before their eyes they watched as the blood started re-entering Kurama's body before the wounds started to close up. After a few more minutes Naruto pulled his hands away and they were all shocked to see only 3 long white scars were left behind. He is alright no but is unconscious, so we will have to carry him until he wakes up. Naruto said, snapping the girls out of their shock. I'll carry him, Naruto. Selena said while stepping forward, receiving a grateful look from Naruto as he handed Kurama to her. Thanks Selena, he said quietly. Come guys, let's get out of here before we're attacked again, Clarice said in a subdued tone, getting nods from the other two. They made out of the junkyard with no more trouble and found a tow truck near the exit. Clarice checked it out and found that it had a full tank of gas. Guys, we can use this to get to the next Pearl in Las Vegas, Clarice said. Do either of you know how to hotwire a vehicle? Selena asked, getting a shrug from Clarice but a nod from Naruto. They both looked at Naruto a little shocked. What Stephanie said it was a good skill to know as a demigod, Naruto said, getting nods from the girls as he began to hotwire the truck. After a few moments he had the truck started and told the girls to get in. Selena slid into the truck carefully, making sure not to hurt Kurama as she did, and moved to the middle of the seat. Clarice then got in and shut the door. Naruto then put the truck in drive and headed out towards Las Vegas. Are you sure we're headed in the right direction, Naruto? Clarice asked him. Yeah, pretty sure. I'm using the stars as a guide, and before you start, remember one of my moms is the goddess of the moon, so I know a lot about the night sky, Naruto said, getting a nod from her. Alright, how long do you think it will take for Kurama to wake up? Selena asked him. Well, he is just resting now, so maybe a few hours. He will probably be up just as we get to Vegas, Naruto said, causing her to smile in happiness. After that they just sat in companionable silence, agreeing just from looks that talking was not needed at the moment.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.